most of the buildings that you're in, when you finally get to come back to campus, were paid for 100% by the state. So I will skip over this slide. This is more for the board, but I probably don't need to sort of continue to talk about this pension thing. All you need to know is that we have this sort of structural deficit year in and year out. We started last year with a $20 million deficit. We started, then COVID happened. We started this year with a substantial deficit as well, but without taking into account COVID. But we've managed through. So I will tell you, fiscal 20, the year that ended June 30th of 2020, it included the spring semester last year when we closed our dorms 7 weeks early, was where the principal COVID impacts, immediate COVID impacts were to UConn. Refunds, if you lived in a dorm last year, you got a refund of 7 weeks of your room and board. That cost the university $33.6 million. That was fair, and you were owed that since we kicked you out. But at the same time, you should know that the university did not have a reduction in expenditure of that amount. We still, of course, had to pay for heat and light and the maintenance of the campus, and most of the university's employees continued to work, many of them from home. And we didn't immediately lay off everybody, RAs and RDs and all of that at that time. So UConn just incurred that refund as a cost without an offsetting reduction in expenditure. So we sort of started the COVID crisis in March with a $33 million deficit approximately. The second column here, this FY20 updated forecast, shows, and this, I want to say we made this forecast, I can't remember when, it was in the spring, April or May, that between the time of March and the end of the fiscal year, we received CARES Act funding from Congress. That was $10.8 million, which got us about a third of the way through the deficit. Many of you know that we also received an additional slug of matching amount of CARES Act funding, $10.8 million, that we were required to pass on 100% to students. And I hope some of you saw that money as refunds on your fee bills. But 10.8 impacted our budget. And then the rest, we winnowed down we implemented a hiring freeze and a spending freeze. So we pretty much clamped down on spending on campus. Managers at the university all took furloughs. So we reduced management pay by between 5 and 10%, depending on the manager. The president and his cabinet and the deans all took as furlough days 2 days per month, which equates to about a 10% pay cut. And all other managers a 5% pay cut, 1 day per month furloughed. And we reduced the amount of money we spend on capital projects, assigned projects, and debt service. You can see that we had originally budgeted $31 million, and these are for improvements on campus, and we ended up at 22.5. Bottom line is we were able to manage the deficit down to 2.4 million for the fiscal year 20, which is close enough to balance for a $1.5 billion budget. We feel pretty good about that. Fiscal year 21, the year that we're in right now, the main things that affected the university's budget were the reduction in housing and dining on campus, and I'll turn to this slide to show you this. We had originally expected back in June that we would be reducing housing and dining capacity on campus by about 30%, that we would be running at about 70% capacity. UConn's housing and dining system it's about 12,000 beds. We had originally thought we'd be about 8,000 beds. We ended up at about 5,000 is the number of students that are actually living on campus now. And gosh, I'm sort of scanning the screen here to see who looks like they're in a dorm room. If you're on campus, raise your hand. Cool, thank you. I hope you're well and safe and having a happy experience. Hey, great. All of that said, and I promise, even though I'm the CFO, I'm not just looking at the fee revenue from your experience. I really do want you to have a great time in the dorms. The We originally thought that the impact um, of COVID on the university's budget would be a $33 million reduction in housing and dining revenue. We also thought it'd be a $24 million reduction in tuition. We had projections that we really did think a lot of students would sit this one out and just take a gap year, stay home, et cetera. And gosh, I think we did some good planning. I think while online is not the best way or the happiest way to learn, I think there's a lot of optimism in our community. And the truth is, and I'll go back to this, our enrollment now is higher than it's ever been. We actually gained on the tuition side an enrollment, and I'll go back here to show you. We do our census of the university on the 10th day of classes. That's the same day as the add drop deadline. So it's on that day that we count everybody up and we know how many people we have. And you can see in this section here that we're actually up 6.2% in freshmen at the Storrs campus. At the regional campuses, up 16.3%. We think that's because students who otherwise might have gone away to school to others out of state or to privates said their version of sitting this one out was really, I'm just going to enroll at UConn Hartford, and that's good for us, and hopefully they'll stay with us and maybe come to the Storrs campus at some point.
I have a quick question, if you don't mind. I
sure,
was wondering, I've seen a couple in the comments. Do you mind if people ask questions during the presentation?
Not at all. Please jump right in.
Okay, so I see one asking if this is typical growth or if it's abnormally high.
It's unusually high. It's normally we peg our we target our freshman class. We'll set a target for enrollment. I think it was 3,600 this year, and it's easy to understand logically, but at first glance you'd say, well, geez, how do you not know how many people you're going to have? But of course, it's not just about the number of students we accept. It's about the number we accept and then the number who actually come, because in the enrollment world they call that yield. For every I don't know what our numbers are exactly, but to fill a freshman seat, we have to make an offer of 1 point something number of students. It's probably 1.5 or so. And I see this question, don't you have a wait list though? And the answer is we do, but that's for admission, right? So what we do is once we make you an offer of admission, you have every right to send in your deposit and be part of UConn. We don't deny you at that point. So if more students than we estimated actually accept the admission, then we end up with more students than we expected, and that is what happened this year. And truth is, with the shift towards more online learning, we probably have more capacity. We are largely limited by the number of dorm beds that we have, the number of seats we have in classrooms, and in particular, in the sciences, the number of spaces we have in our labs. Our biology labs in particular are tight. So we sort of have to peg our enrollment based on those limiting factors. But with online, I don't think it's been a problem this year.
Moving forward, hi Scott, are we looking to use that to use that realization to maybe increase our capacity by accepting more students online? That's a good question, and I'm a little bit out of my area on this. I think the provost office is working harder on this. Again, because as the finance guy, I'd be thrilled if more online students came and paid tuition, and honestly, that would provide money to provide more services to all of you. It's UConn's not a for-profit, so any money that comes in helps us balance the budget and helps provide more for you. So I'm thrilled to do that. I will share with you one pretty cool, exciting thing that really helped these numbers this year. One of the things, and you'll see, let me see if it's up here. Yeah, here we had estimated a 40% decline in international students for this year, and you're probably aware, if you're on campus in person in any year other than the COVID year, that UConn's a pretty international campus. We have a lot of students come from all over the world, in particular from Asia and China. And with COVID and travel bans and all of that, we were very concerned that the international students wouldn't come. We worked with the international student community over the course of the summer to help support and keep as many of them here as they could. And we had a number of international students staying in our dorms. We also, and this is the second bullet, and I'm bragging a little bit to you guys, and I hope you can appreciate it, about how much hustle folks in UConn's global affairs and enrollment management departments showed here. They actually entered into a partnership with 2 Chinese universities where UConn admitted and enrolled students who were stuck in China, who couldn't come here to go to school, could take in-person classes at the universities in China. So there are Chinese national students paying tuition to UConn who are going to Chinese universities, and the classes they're taking are getting them UConn credit, and they are enrolled at UConn, and when everything opens up again, they can just resume back here. And I think this is fairly unique. We've not heard of any other university moving as fast and to do that. And we had, I can't remember the number, I'm going to say 400 or 500 students actually take advantage of that this year. And that could potentially get expanded to allow broader exchange. So now we have these relationships at this scale where if a Chinese university is looking, and these particular classes are taught in English. So, I would expect to see more of that and more opportunity potentially for students from the US to go to China eventually and be able to, now that there's all this capacity for hundreds of students to learn in English in China. That's and I'm trying to, if I look distracted, I'm trying to follow the chat while I'm so if I miss a question on chat while I'm talking, just please help me, just shout out, interrupt me at any point. So bottom line,
sure, you have another one from Lakita here. Sorry to interrupt you just as you got going again. Okay. It was asking about transfer credits from other colleges. Especially with like lab sciences in this environment. If you scroll up a little bit, it should be there.
Yeah, and like I said, I will only get myself and you in trouble if you rely on me to tell you how your credits can transfer. That'll be through the provost or enrollment management. But lab science online, yeah. So I do know that most of those policies are made at the University Senate. The provost office leads the staff work on it, and they work with the University Senate. If ever you're interested, so the university has 3 senates: the undergraduate, the graduate, and the University Senate. And there are undergraduate, you probably know this, but I'm making a pitch if anybody cares. It's pretty interesting, and it's open to the public, and there are seats for undergrads at the University Senate. And that's where things get decided, like what the school year schedule looks like, how the credits and the core requirements get worked out, et cetera. It's pretty interesting and very collaborative experience. So I'm pausing for the chat, and I'll keep rambling. Please just interrupt me.
Just one question before we move on. Oh, was someone else saying something? Oh, okay. So I know we were talking a little while back about the abnormal growth that we didn't expect. Is there a worry that if we're having a lot of people come on with like online classes and completely asynchronous and away from campus, that when everybody tries to come back after COVID is over, that there isn't going to be space for everybody?
I don't think there's not so many that we can't figure it out. That's how I would put it. I mean, most of this is at the regional campuses. The Stories campus, we're up for undergraduates by looks like less than 100 total enrollment. So I'm not worried about it. In fact, when we were forecasting these huge declines in enrollment, I'm just thrilled that you all came. So thank you. I hope you're still planning to come in spring too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So here's where we ended up. We're a little up in tuition revenue. We're way down on housing and dining revenue, $67 million on the fiscal year. Financial aid, need-based financial aid is up, where COVID has affected a lot of families. There's a lot of people out of work, a lot of families stressed, and our enrollment management financial aid departments have really tried to meet the need. And I'll tell you, if you or any of your friends or family or anybody you know is in need and really struggling to pay your fee bill, don't be afraid to get directly in touch with them and tell them your story. We don't always have enough to meet everybody's need, but it is something we try to do. And the Yukon Foundation has been raising money to help with this too through I think it's called the Students First Fund that they've set up to help. And then when most people sort of think, geez, seems the COVID impact on the university must be huge on the expense side, and it is true that we're spending a couple of $1 million on testing, and we are, of course, we had to put stickers all over campus to tell you where to sit and where, and some plexiglass and all of that. But the total, the net of all of those expenses minus the savings from, at the same time, we just don't have, no, not 100 million. I said 1 or 2 million for testing. I'm following the chat. And, we're looking for, and later on, I think I explained this, we are keeping track of all of our COVID expenses, and state government has committed to reimbursing us for them. So we're hoping that the testing will get reimbursed. But our total offsets of how we're just running, the campus is cleaner, there are fewer people there, there's just less activity. So the savings as a result of that have offset. But the net total current deficit, this column here, is that we're running at about a $76 million deficit currently.
I have a question about those numbers.
Sure.
Is that a profit loss thing, or is that an increase decrease from previous year? What is it? What does the 6.6 mean in this case?
Oh, that's a good question. The 6.6 is the 6.6 is against the baseline budget that we prepared, sort of a pre-COVID trend that we expected to be on. So it was our original forecast, which I don't show here, but it's not. It's neither the FY20 actual nor is it some trend or other estimate. We start each fiscal year with a baseline analysis of what how much we think wages are going up, enrollment, financial aid, and then there are impacts off of that, and that's what this represents. Oh, by the way, the baseline that we create is a balanced budget scenario. So that's why both of these columns are June. The BOT is Board of Trustees. So the Board of the estimate we prepared for the Board of Trustees in June showed a $65 million deficit. The estimate that we're currently carrying is a $75 million deficit.
Vice President Jordan, quick question before we move on.
Sure.
First, thank you for being here. But last fiscal year, do you recall what our deficit was projected to be at this point in the last fiscal year?
Yeah, I think I can tell you that. Hold on. Yeah, it was $20 million.
So there's a $55 million difference. Wow.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
And there is Yukon is big, and it's not just big, but it's broad. We've got 100+ departments, and when you guys probably think of them as academic departments, but they're all, so you can major in anthropology or sociology, but from my perspective they're also like little businesses. They each have their own budget, and universities almost universally are pretty decentralized, right? So the president and the provost and I don't tell the sociology department how many professors to hire or who should work there. We give them a budget and we have them, and they get to run their department. What that does mean, though, is that there's a lot of slack in the system. So when we started the year in fiscal 20 and we estimated a $20 million deficit, what we did was we just kept sort of crunching down or tightening down throughout the fiscal year, knowing that over the course of the year, we have about a 10% employee turnover each year. We have, decisions get made, every day about spending money or not spending money. And that just by kind of carefully managing it against the $1.5 billion deficit, we were comfortable with 20 million. And I'll share with you where we're at today. So we started off with, or we think we are now at about at a sort of baseline basis, a $76 million deficit. But we've been working it hard, and what you'll see sort of in this section of this spreadsheet here is that the departments of the university have already cut 22 million, and they've actually realized 12 of that. So we're running a little ahead of schedule on just the sort of belt tightening that's happening across the board. We've moved some money. This capital reallocation is really about, we've got two sources of money to build and maintain buildings on campus. We've got cash that is part of our operating budget, but we also use state bond money. And there are a lot of rules about what you can and can't bond for. You shouldn't, in your personal life, or if you're managing an institution, you should not borrow money that you're going to pay back over years and years for something that you don't get to keep for years and years. Don't put restaurant meals on your credit card, though we all do, or pay the balance off entirely. So there's a limited amount of ability for us to do that, but we do take a look and we say, well, geez, how much of these improvements we were going to do on campus have a useful life that matches up with the time that we would pay off a bond, or the state would pay off a bond, and how much can we reallocate? So we've been able to reallocate $9 million there. We've got another round of $13 million of cuts working its way through all of the departments of the university. So far, they've managed it pretty comfortably. It's none of this is good. It doesn't make for a bigger, better university when departments leave vacancies for a long time, or reduce the number of offerings that they have. But at the same time, in this environment where there's very few people on campus, folks are able to tighten their belts. The management furloughs saved us $4 million this fiscal year, so when we add it all up, we are right now at about a $28 million deficit that we haven't solved yet. And that's actually not way off the 19 million from last year. So I'm not going to say I'm comfortable, but I will say that if we're under our current projection, we think that using continued departmental belt tightening and use of some people sometimes refer to them as reserves. We don't really have a lot of money in the bank, but we do have some fund balances from prior years that can be relied on. And I will be honest with you, there will probably be some limited layoffs of some, in some departments on campus. So I want to be straight about that. There will not be, as far as we're not planning on sort of mass layoffs like you would see, in some places in the economy, but there will probably be a few here and there as departments tighten their belts. I am seeing a couple of questions that come in, so I'll see if I can answer those. I'm seeing the "We love COVID" comment. I'm so sick of COVID. Let's see what do infrastructure fees cover? So the infrastructure fee, if you look on your fee bill, there's a thing called the infrastructure fee. That goes two places. First, that's actually pledged to a series of bonds that the university issued years ago to build the whole of the South Campus and the parking garages. And second, it goes to maintain the campus. We set aside that as a pot of money that the facilities operations department uses, mostly to maintain to maintain buildings. I won't say it's mostly for dorms. I think they do spend it mostly on dorms, but it's just a capital maintenance charge. And the second half of that question, does tuition go only towards covering faculty wages or other things as well? Without making it, I'm going to try to be concise. Budget is best thought of as having sort of several sources of revenue. The first source you could think of as our general fund, and that is made up of the money the state gives us, and the money that and tuition. Those dollars pay salaries for faculty, and the sort of general operation of the university. So faculty, administration, facilities operations, all of that sort of general the stuff you think of as the core functioning of the campus is paid with state dollars and tuition dollars. Most of your fee dollars go into separate funds to support just that thing that your fees that, like housing and dining, go into accounts that support housing and dining. The infrastructure fee goes into the infrastructure fee account that gets spent just on mostly repairs and improvements to the campus. What other fees have we got? The student health fee goes to Shaw to pay for their stuff, and of course the rec fee, which is one of the bigger ones. About half of that goes to pay the debt on the rec center. That was it cost $100 million to build that, and the other half goes to operate it. And one thing you should know, or at least I'm pleased with, just by way of good stewardship, we are setting aside money from the rec center fee every year in a special account that can only be used to maintain and improve and repair the rec center. So it's our intention, it's brand new and beautiful now. It's our intention to keep that brand, won't be brand new, but keep it beautiful for its whole life. There's no way, in my view, a student should pay a fee to go to a rec center that's falling down because we didn't maintain it 10 or 20 years from now. So we're trying to be very careful with that. So this is our current scenario. I do want to, I see another question about the bonds. I'm a kind of a bond guy, so I'll talk bonds all day with you if you want. So the question is, are bonds issued by UConn, or are they through the state? So it's not that complicated. UConn issues the bond. We issue about $200 million in bonds a year. Buildings that during your time on campus we've built this way, the Worth, what we used to call the STEM dorm, the Worth Residence Hall, the Engineering and Science building, the Innovation Partnership building. These are all buildings that were built just in the last couple of years, all built by bonds that UConn issued, but that the state pays all of the debt service on. It's in our, if you buy a bond, it'll be a UConn bond. There's another one coming up in a month or two. So if you're interested in buying a UConn bond, you can. But it says University of Connecticut on the bond, but the state pays the bondholders for it, and that's how the state provides a lot of support for the university. So every number I've talked about so far is what we're calling our current case scenario, and that assumes that we stay open through the fall, and knock on wood, it looks like we're going to. We are now in a place where we have very low COVID on campus. I think today was a day where we had 0 positive cases on campus. We test every day, and we have the numbers every day. I can't remember if anyone's seen the dashboard. I think maybe 17 students in medical isolation today. We have, I can't remember, we had 250 beds and we're adding another 150. So I don't know if those are online yet or not, but we'll be up to 400 isolation beds. We have plenty of capacity to stay open at this time. But it also assumes that we're open in the spring for the whole spring semester. So all of these numbers I've talked about so far, you could see as best case scenario. We're also very concerned that if we have to close early now, the scenarios we've been planning up till now assumed a November 1st date. I'm actually kind of celebrating that the worst case scenario isn't going to happen. We are not going to close before November 1st. We're probably not going to close this semester. It's very, very unlikely. An early closure results in a $2 million per week refund in housing and dining. If you're doing the math and you said, geez, you were at $30 million last semester over 7 weeks, it's $2 million a week is quite a lot lower than that. It's because we only have 5,000 students in dorms right now versus 12,000 last year. But if we had to close November 1st, that deficit number would go from 28 million to 49 million. It would double, not quite double. But that's the concern that we have, and we're tracking so far, so good. Optimism.
Vice President Jordan.
I was gonna say something, but I think people are speaking at once, and I don't know if we're all gonna say the same thing.
My question is about what happens if we close early in the spring.
Yep.
Not sure if that's related to Neha's or Damani's question.
So
we're going to go Ben, Damani, Neha.
Okay, Ben, you
just
go
to kind
first.
of give a little bit of order to this.
Okay. What happens if we close early in the spring? Is that included in the early close scenario? What is that?
So in the early close scenario here, think of it now as a worst case scenario, and it's actually the worst of the worst. It would be we close like tomorrow or whenever November 1st is, and we stay closed through the spring. So we know that that's not going to happen. This estimate needs to be updated. I would and that best way to sort of eyeball this and understand where that $49 million number could go as far as this worst case scenario deficit is it's $2 million a week for each week of closure. So so you can kind of slide it up and down depending on that. And at the end of the semester, we'll do a new version of this that just focuses on the spring semester. We'll do sort of a mid-year update. Actually, we do updates quarterly. So this is the September update. We'll do one in December.
Damani, go ahead.
My turn.
First, I'd like to thank you for coming in again this year, Scott.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you as well. I first want to say that I expected to hear the word fringe more than I've heard it thus far, because that's normally one of the refrains that we get year to year, but we might not have made it to that slide yet. My question pertains to the news that we heard about the Connecticut commitment today. I'd like you to talk a bit about the relationship that UConn has with the foundation, as well as the way the Connecticut commitment was intended to be funded, and then a little bit about the funds that exist there and what our access to them is, and then which questions would be best directed towards Scott Roberts.
Sure, I can actually. I'm on a good slide for that, and if since Damani, we're gonna go sort of down the path of financial aid. Do you mind if I check in with Neha to make sure that she didn't want to ask a question about closing early or any of that? We can maybe close that topic out.
Go ahead.
Hello. Sorry, I sounded a little sad because I do have to run right after this. Which is why I was like, oh, I don't have a lot of time. But it wasn't about the closing. It actually had to do exactly with Damani. I was just going to clarify that Brandon, Michael, and I believe Darren asked about it, and they kind of worded it in similar ways, but Darren's concern was with the bipartisan, if we are, basing a lot of our reasoning to come to UConn off this Connecticut Commitment Fund. My wording might be off. And I know that was like one of the president's big ways of, encouraging inner city kids and people who are of color. Like, how are we going to support them now? Is there another program that's being talked about? And I know that they all three asked it, so.
Great. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about that.
Sorry to derail the conversation one more time. I'm sorry, Vice President Jordan. Lakita also had a question, if you wanted to go over that, since I saw that you wanted to field other questions before going into this topic. So we had one more person raise their hand. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to let her ask her question first.
Oh, so is it about rec center?
I don't know. It might be. So Lakita, feel free to ask your question now.
Cool. It was about like a couple of things actually. I can just like go real quick, and if it's like if you want to wait till later to answer them, that's totally fine too. But one of them was about why I guess like since the state does pay for our construction, why it didn't cover the construction fees for the rec center as well. And then as far as infrastructure fees, I was curious as to why students that are entirely virtual also have to pay for the infrastructure fees because they're not even on campus.
Yeah.
And sorry, two other questions. You meant like there was the question on bonds. I was just curious, are those also the endowment funds? And
no, so actually this is sort of a good constellation of questions. I'll try to answer as many of them as I can in a coherent way, and then we can talk Connecticut commitment. And so first, the state bond money, when we issue a bond, the state pays for the bond. There's a statute on that. That people refer to as the UConn 2000 statute. The latest round was called Next Gen, and it specifically described what sort of buildings they would pay for, and they weren't. They were like science buildings, like so. There's Next Gen was kind of a STEM initiative, and it was the engineering and science building, the STEM dorm. The Science One building, which is going in, I think it's called X Lot. That it's an enormous. It's where the Spirit Rock is. Enormous project to build a whole new, a giant science complex there. It did not include a rec center. And traditionally on college campuses, the best way to think about this, it's similar to what I was describing about how tuition and state dollars pay for faculty in the core campus operations. The thing of it as your tuition and honestly state support paying for the core curricular part of the campus, and then a lot of the on-campus experiences that students want and we want them to have are funded by the students themselves. So think of in a small way the rec program and club sports and even student government and most of the stuff that happens in the student union. Those are not part of the curricular experience, they're extracurricular. And those, if you're sort of reading your fee bill and trying to find some logic to it, think of it that way. There's the curricular experience, which is tuition and some of the mandatory fees, and then the extracurricular. And some of those extracurriculars aren't like fun, they're like Shaw, right? So it's student health, but they're not part of that in-classroom experience. And rec centers for the most part are paid for through a rec center fee on most college campuses. So that's why that was done that way. And before your time, and I will admit, generationally maybe challenging, the students who were here back when this was being debated and discussed, which would have been 2012, 13, 14. So I started in 2015, and this was already decided that we were going to build a rec center. The students back then were very much involved in this, and it was really a sort of a campus-wide commitment to provide a rec center comparable to what many other universities had. So, like I say, you weren't there for the decision, most of you, but it was done with the administration and the students together. So I hope that answered your questions, Lakita, and I do want to get right to the role of philanthropy at the university, the Connecticut commitment, et cetera. So on this slide, I'm showing the total fiscal 21 UConn budget in the way that some of you have seen it before. And what you see here is revenues at the top and expenses at the bottom. And under revenues, we show here our state support, $392 million, tuition, $461 million, et cetera, as we sort of work our way down. And this is our base case scenario. So it's sort of, I think it's the same number for the things we're talking about today. The COVID has not affected them. But what you'll see down here where it says other revenue, oh gosh, so we, for the sake of fitting this all on one table, we consolidated foundation in. Let me see if I've got another slide for that. Well, I have another slide deck that we can go in more depth for, but maybe you can just take my word for it. The total amount of money we get from the foundation each year is about $20 million a year, out of a total of $1.5 billion. It is one of the other slide decks I've shown to you all before shows a pie chart for this. It's a tiny sliver. It's like I think it's like 8%. It's of our overall budget. And one of the big contrasts between UConn is got so many great things going on financially. One of the things compared to our peers that isn't great financially for UConn is the amount of money we get from philanthropy, from our foundation. For a variety of reasons, public universities, especially in the Northeast, in New York and New England, don't have very big endowments. And we all know the names of the schools that have giant endowments, like Harvard and Yale. But there are also a lot of public universities that have big endowments, like Virginia and Michigan and Texas. And those are in the billions. UConn's endowment is about $400 million. The way endowments work is that the donor gives the money to the foundation. The donor requires that the foundation create an endowment with that money. And what that means is that the foundation can't spend the money. The foundation has to invest the money. And the university gets to spend the earnings on the investment. Now, because earnings on the investment tend to go up and down with the markets, most foundations and their donors just set a number, and our number is 4%. So if you think about the UConn endowment having $400 million, that means that 4% of that, about $16 million a year, is available to the university to spend. And the purpose of the endowment is that it is there forever. It ought to stay, it ought to earn money forever. And that's why a donor would give that. They'd say, geez, you've probably heard the term endowed professor, right? So an endowed professor is a donor gave money to pay that professor's salary forever. To say, I want there to be a professor in medieval literature, and I'll pay for it. And here's some money to pay them forever. That's a very common practice in higher ed. And so to endow the Connecticut commitment, Tom's original goal with Connecticut commitment was to create an endowment that would support the program forever. And we estimated that would be about $100 million. We knew that we could raise money before then, and it's totally up to a donor whether it's an endowed gift or not. It would be to raise what we call unrestricted gifts, where a donor would say, give us $100,000 and we could take the whole 100 to pay for that program now. And our plan was to ramp up over time endowment gifts and unrestricted gifts at a pace that would support the program fully until it became fully endowed. And the goal for this year we thought it would be about $1 million that it would cost us. The good news is that the program only cost $700,000, but the bad news is we only raised about $400 towards the program. And I'm watching the chat. Yes, I can send you the slide decks. So and just to go a little bit into the sort of the way the Connecticut commitment was constructed, the financial aid process is complicated and not very transparent, and definitely not transparent to high school sophomores, juniors, and seniors. In fact, I'm a parent of college age, or two of my kids have graduated college. One's in college now. I remember, waiting to get that financial aid letter. This is like 10 years ago when my oldest kids were going to college, and not really knowing, like in August, how we were going to pull off September. So I totally get how crazy that is. Multiply that by like 100. If you have like literally no idea how you're going to pay for school, you might not even apply, right? If you're a student that the Connecticut commitment was targeting, a student in a family with an income of less than $50,000, and you're go to the website and it says $30,000 to go to school, you might say, why would I even bother? Unless you know that there's this crazy complicated financial aid mechanism. So the purpose of the Connecticut commitment always was to make it really totally transparent and clear that to high school age students that there was a way for you to come, that you should totally apply. We've got you covered. That's like the message of Connecticut commitment. And it was always meant to be a last dollar. So if your first dollar in your financial aid, if you think of I think of financial aid as a stack, right? It's like a column, Pell, maybe institutional aid, that it would be, UConn dollars, maybe a departmental scholarship, maybe a foundation scholarship, and you just sort of build it up. And for most students, we meet, certainly most students in that space, we meet most of their need. But UConn just does not have the endowment or the level of state support that we would need to make a blanket commitment that some schools do, that they can meet all demonstrated need. So what we wanted to do is to say, at least for students that are under $50,000 family income, that last gap, which for some students might be $500, and for some students might be $2,000, and for others might be $10,000, that last piece of the stack, that was the Connecticut commitment. The way that we modeled it, and the way that President Katsilas worked it out with our board of trustees, was that that last piece would be from private philanthropy. And there's sort of a double whammy. The first was that the private philanthropy did not come through at the rate that we needed it to. And the second was COVID. So even as COVID was eating up more of the financial aid budget sort of underneath, at the bottom of that stack, and philanthropy was going towards COVID stuff, it wasn't going towards Connecticut commitment. So what Tom said today was that because when we make a promise to a student in your freshman year of financial aid, it is our intention to commit to that level of support for all of your 4 years or 5 years here. That we will, so every dollar that we give in Connecticut commitment, we're in our financial planning, we're assuming $4, right, for each of your years at the university. And Tom was very sort of reticent with the board of trustees today that what we want to do is we still want to meet our commitment, our promise with a small c, to meet student need, and to meet as much of that need as we can for students whose family income is under $50,000. But we are not at a place in our budget or in our philanthropy where at this time we can make a commitment to next year's class that ultimately is a 4-year commitment. he hopes to be able to continue to work hard to raise money through philanthropy. Maybe today's announcement causes that. You know, I'm kind of hoping that people who give money to UConn will see the announcement today and say, "Oh shoot, who do I make the check out to?" And you know, and top this thing off. But we were falling so far short. And again, think of this as a 4-year commitment. So if this year's freshman class, the Connecticut commitment was $700,000. Next year, that same cohort of students is 700 plus the new freshman class. So it goes up each year fully rolled out. We're estimating the total cost of the Connecticut commitment to be $5 million-ish, and that's really the thing that sort of caused us to take a pause, to say, you know, we are not on a pace to have $5 million a year each year to meet this promise. That said, we will do our best to meet need. This is a backing away from that particular promise, but there are other ways. There's a program that's rolled out in Hartford, and I want to say, I'll probably get it wrong. I know it's in Hartford. It may also be in Bridgeport, but it's a city by city program called the name of the city, so the Hartford Promise, that is specifically targeting students with need from that city. There's of course all of our normal financial aid, and then of course, and then the additional aid that we're raising for COVID. So it's I'm not going to lie, this is a very disappointing thing for me and for Tom and for our enrollment management team to have to deal with today, but that's where we're at as of right now. And I think his language is, it's a 1-year pause on making the commitment to next year's freshman class.
I appreciate that sentiment, and it's a rather unpleasant note to end on, but I know that we're at 7:30, and I would appreciate it if we could limit kind of questions and see if we can get through what we can of the presentation in the next 10 minutes and kind of wind up, because we have a couple of things to do, and I don't want to hold you here much longer than you've scheduled to be. So I think we're going to put a hold on the questions. If it's okay with you, I can make your email or your secretary's email available to anyone who has any further questions.
I'd be happy to. And I know this is like fresh bad news today. I am sure that Tom would be happy to engage with you if he can. I also know that Nathan First, our Vice President for Enrollment, he manages admissions and financial aid, and Scott Roberts would be happy to engage with you. I also know that the population of students helped by Connecticut Commitment is a diverse, substantial population of students that we all care about, including dreamers, including low-income students, including students who have other mitigating factors that affect their need. And I am this is not like official UConn policy, but it's certainly our sentiment. We want, if we're not helping them, if we're not helping people through Connecticut Commitment as a program, we still want to help however we can to meet student need. So I see here there's a note about Pell and about, so you guys have a pretty good understanding of how this works, and whatever we can do to increase philanthropy or raise even student awareness of the help that we want to give to students that have need. We all want to work together on this.
Wonderful.
So I think I actually kind of have hit, let me turn the slide here. I may have hit the end of my slides. I mean, there's some stuff we talked about with our board about the latest round of 28 million. I do want you to know that our plan, and we did convene a what we call the fiscal working group that was made up of faculty and staff, and worked through our budget office that provided sort of broad guidance. And what they did was they came out with a blueprint that more or less said, hey, we want to make sure if we're cutting that it hits academics and administration proportionally, that it affects athletics too, and that it is balanced. You don't see it on this slide, but that it's balanced between cuts and use of any fund balances that the university has. There's a sentiment that says, geez, if you've got a rainy day fund, if now is not raining, then when? And the truth is we don't want it to go to zero, but we are going to be using some of that to balance the budget. And you can see here, this is just sort of the blueprint of how we're allocating these cuts. You should know it's not proportional, because when you say academics and administration at 19 each, as it should be, the academic enterprise of the university is about 2/3 of the spending of the university. And administration, by the way, does include stuff that you would think is academic but isn't, like financial aid is part of what we call administration. It's not just guys like me and accountants sitting in offices. We're not too bloated. We're not bloated at all on that. In fact, we're leaner than most universities. But there's also a sentiment that athletics share in the cuts, and you probably have all heard that they did cut several sports earlier this year. And with the move to the Big East, that's a big savings. Most athletic contests will be now by bus, not by jet. And so they're working hard there to reduce their cost too. This slide's only interesting if you're a state government person. I almost said nerd or geek, but I'm one of those, so I feel like it's a term of affection. The state of Connecticut does its budgeting on a biennial basis. They do 2 fiscal years at a time. We have submitted this $28 million deficit to them, and we've said, hey, we want you to appropriate this money to us as our COVID. We're calling it a bridge loan or a bridge, so that we don't have to do any more cutting. They're not in session now, but I'm informing you, so you will be informed in case any of you are politically active. And if if your state rep asks you, hey, what can I do? Simple thing you could say. Of course, you can say whatever you want to them. You could say, save the Connecticut commitment. That would, 5 million would do that. You can also say, hey, don't cut UConn anymore. Give them the 28. Like, freedom of speech, say whatever you want, but that's what I'm telling them. That's my presentation tonight. Going into the spring, we're all just worried about COVID. And the impacts on the state. The state budget's under stress too. And we want to make sure that as the state tries to balance its budget, they don't do it by cutting us, because that's sort of like a double cut. So thanks for your time tonight. I appreciate you hearing me out. I could do another whole hour on the hospital. That's the second half of this slide deck, but I won't make it. Call me later, maybe if you're interested in hospital administration, we could talk about that.
All right.
Oh,
thank you very
much. Because Damani mentioned it, if Ben asked it. Who controls fringe rates? The state comptroller controls fringe rates. They put them on their website, and you can see them. And fringe rates, by the way, just because Damani asked, I'm going there. The fringe rate is the percentage, and it is the dollar or the percentage applied to a dollar of wage. So for every dollar I get paid, the state fringe rate is charged to the university. And for me, the fringe rate I think is like 70%. So when you see a professor on campus who makes $100,000 a year, it costs the university $170,000 because we give the professor $100 and we give the state $70, and that pays for their health insurance and their retirement and their Social Security. And it's that retirement piece that's outrageous. A regular fringe rate at most universities is 30 or 40%. That's my fringe piece for you, Damani. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to give Damani and Fabio a brief opportunity, Damani and then Fabio, to say a quick thank you and a quick goodbye, or ask a very quick question, because we do have.
I'll let Fabio go first, because I'm going to come out of left field with my question.
Damani, I appreciate that, but I'm coming out of left field too. Vice President Jordan, one of the things I remember from your presentation last year was talking about the GUF fee. And if you remember, you asked the Student Senate if we would support raising the GUF fee, and the purpose of that would really be to provide better services through student health and wellness. Was there a change in this year's GUF fee? Did you consider raising that? And what can we do, to help get better services for student health and wellness?
And that's a good question, and I'll answer that 2 ways. I think we raised the GUF some this year, though. Gosh, I can't remember. Does anybody know? I think we raised it a little bit, like by inflation. You should know that we did pull health and wellness out of the GUF 2 years ago. You now pay a separate fee. I think it's called the student health fee, because the student health costs were so high compared to the rest of the GUF. We just thought, for transparency, we ought to show them separately. There is a process each year run through the student affairs office. I think there's a GUF committee that meets with students to try to figure out how, like, where the GUF should be and what services should be provided. There's also a presidential task force on student mental health that has been meeting, and I think has student representation on it. Their report is due out this semester, I think. In fact, I've seen a draft of it. It does recommend more student mental health services. And we of course would have to figure out how to pay for that, and it would be through that fee. But I would I'd encourage you to make sure that you don't, like, make sure all of us administrators, keep hearing from you about how important this is to you, because the work is happening. The president established this right after he started working here, this task force. But don't let that report slip by. Like, read it. If you care about it, comment on it. Make sure that the president's office and I and everybody else knows that you care about it when it comes out. We're working on it, but we do want to make sure that your voices are heard.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Damani?
Yeah, so earlier, and again, this is really not financial at all, but more in your role as the executive vice president of administration. Earlier today, the search committee for a new police chief met for the first time, I believe. And that is since Chief Reinhardt, or former chief, now Vice President Reinhardt, separated the two roles. Could you speak briefly about what your idea of the division of public safety is going to kind of look like going forward, and what things you think will be central to that search?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for noticing that we launched that. And I'll tell you, Hans Reinhardt is he's really just an exemplary police leader and public safety leader. In the sort of, I heard that from him several years ago, before any of the current events were happening. The terminology of, and maybe you've heard this terminology too, of warrior versus guardian, that there's sort of this fight in police culture around what the role of the police department is. Are they warriors or are they guardians? And he brought that to me a long time ago, that the Yukon Police Department sees itself, or should see itself, as guardians and caretakers of our community. I put him in that position of being both police chief and vice president of public safety, and then I started building several years ago what I thought was needed to be a much stronger emphasis on public safety. We started a Office of Emergency Management to plan for things like COVID, and put that under him. We moved environmental health and safety. We have a whole department devoted to laboratory safety, public health, environmental. They're the ones that test the water and make sure it's safe and make sure that we're in compliance with our environmental permits. We moved that under him. So we've been building out this broader organization devoted to campus health and safety. And I'm glad we did, because when COVID happened, we actually had an organization on campus, which we had never had before, that had thought of some of these things, and we were able to react. Turns out it was not really fair to Hans or to the police department to elevate the role of their leader to this executive level, put them in charge of public health and emergency management and laboratory safety and the building, fire and building permits on campus, and not provide any sort of backfill to lead the police department. It's what's simply happened is he personally, in his ability to lead at the university, is sort of now elevated, and the role is elevated. It's an important role, that it really is a full-time job, and that this is something he and I have talked about for a while, but he's ready to do now, which is to hire a police chief to be the head of the police department and to maintain this higher level role to coordinate all health and safety activities on our campuses. You should also know, and I don't know if you've met with Hans, he's a great personable guy, but UConn does have a statewide presence, and all of the things I just talked about are not just at the Storrs campus. He's responsible for them at the health center in Farmington, at all of our regional campuses and the law school. And it's important to note that this isn't just a nice to do thing for UConn. It is actually a matter of state law that the university has jurisdiction over its properties. So you could say, geez, do you really need to have UConn cops in Stanford? And how many of them do you need? Or do you really need UConn building inspectors down there? And the answer is you do, because the city, as a matter of jurisdiction, the city of Stanford does not respond to public safety calls at the UConn Stanford campus. So he's got a huge job, many departments reporting to him statewide, in every campus in the state. So it is the right thing to do to split the job into two, and it's the right thing to do to hire a chief. And it is the right thing to have a search committee that's broad and diverse and asks the right questions and gets the right fit for our community. And I would say, I don't want to bias them in any way, but the right fit for our community is somebody who clearly sees policing as a guardian job, clearly sees that their role is taking care of our community and taking care of our students. I'm hopeful. We've engaged a national search firm to get candidates from all over the country. I talked to them just the other day about the sort of leader that we want. I told them the same thing I'm telling you, I look forward to seeing what comes of it.
All right. Thank you again for coming here and taking your time to talk with us rather late into the night. I hope you have a great time, and I really hope to hear from you again sometime soon.
Oh, hey, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. And I see there is a last question about local police. They do come if we call, but we are primary jurisdiction. So if something, usually we have one cop at, say, Avery Point, but the local cops can't arrest people on our campus. We have to do that because it's ours, but we all work together. It's very collaborative. But I think that's the last question. I hope I answered them all. Email me if you have others. Thank you for having me, Luis. Thank you for having me. Have a good night.
Have a nice night. I'll talk to you later. All right. We have lots more on the agenda for tonight, lots of confirmations. I hope to get through the confirmations in a rather expeditious manner because we have to approve our fee plan for next semester, and we have a couple of really important pieces of legislation on the table as well. So with that, we're actually going to move around a little bit because I know that some of the people making confirmations can't be here. We're going to move the approval of the minutes until after we are done with the confirmations, just for the time-sensitive confirmations, at my discretion. So first, we're going to confirm the Veterans Affairs and Military Programs ex officio seat. I am nominating someone for this position. I had the email up. Give me just a moment. I hope that he's in this meeting. Let's see. Sorry, one moment. Oh, it's you? Wonderful. So I nominate you. I didn't see your name. I'm so sorry. That's why I'm pulling up the email.
No,
Feel free to say your name.
Kevin.
Okay. I nominate Kevin to be the Veterans Affairs and Military Programs ex officio senator in USG. Do you accept the nomination, Kevin?
I do.
Wonderful. Does anyone have any questions for Kevin before we confirm him in his Senate seat? Questions or comments are acceptable. Seeing no questions or comments, I move to confirm Kevin as the Veterans Affairs and Military Programs ex officio senator by unanimous consent. Are there any objections to this motion? Seeing no objections, Kevin, congratulations. You're officially a senator. Yay.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the Senate. Here we go. Now what we're moving around is instead of going into the approval of the we're going to go into the confirmation of the Student Development Advocacy Director. I'll allow Michael to make his nomination here.
Thank you, Luis. Good evening, everyone. I would like to nominate Christine Jorgera to the position of Student Development Advocacy Director. Earlier in the school year, Christine stepped up to fill this role on a temporary basis. However, Christine's commitment to the work on the Student Development Committee is far from temporary. She has a long-term vision to student development in and around campus, especially during a pandemic when it's more important than ever to keep our community intact. I am very proud of Christine's work, from her awesome work on the cultural appreciation educational material, which was posted online, to her outreach to organizations on campus. I am confident that Christine will continue growing in this role, and under her leadership, the Student Development Committee will accomplish great things. I hope you will consider Christine's nomination and vote favorably. Thank you.
Christine, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Wonderful. Do we have any questions or comments? I see 3 hands up already. So we're going to go Damani, Fabio, then Noah.
Sorry, that hand is residual.
Okay, so then we're going to go Fabio and then Noah.
Mine was also residual, but having worked with Christine for the past month and a half or however long she's been interim student development advocacy director, I can say that we are all very lucky to have her. So please vote favorably.
Wonderful. Then we have Noah.
Yes. I just wanted to contribute to the conversation for just a couple sentences. For those who don't know the situation that us directors found ourselves in, I'm sure Becky, I know that Katie, Becky, and I all feel the same way. We were looking for someone to step up to join our team. Christine, you were an amazing addition. You are such a hard worker. You do so much for USG. You're awesome, and I cannot wait to see you continue in your capacity in this role. I know that you got the support of everybody here behind you, and yeah, thank you so much.
Wonderful. With that, I'm going to move to confirm Christine as the Student Development Advocacy Director by unanimous consent. Is there anyone opposed to doing this? Feel free to put it in the chat or just unmute your mic and yell at me. Seeing no opposition, congratulations, Christine. Okay, now we move on to the confirmation of the Deputy Director of External Affairs. I'll allow Noah to make his nomination.
Okay, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well. Nice to see everyone. We had a historic amount of applicants come in for our positions. This is the first time that a deputy position or any of my 3 nominees, that these positions have been compensated before. But I am so confident in the abilities of my first nomination, Lily. Lily Forend. Hi, Lily. Lily has been an amazing addition to our committee this year. She is super active. She is super involved. She took some time to actually work down in DC. So she's got an awesome breadth of experience coming in, and it was so great to talk with her about just improving the overall the cultural awareness within our committee, and just our shared prospects to enable external to go just that much farther this year. So it is my absolute privilege to an honor to nominate Lily Forend for Deputy Director of External Affairs.
Lily, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Wonderful. Would you like to say anything? I realize now that I should have given Kevin and Christine a moment to say something, but I was moving a little bit too quickly. So we'll come back to you guys after we're through with nominations for any comments that you might have. Lily, do you have anything you'd like to say before we move into discussion?
I'm excited to be working with you this year.
Wonderful. Are there any other points of discussion or questions? Seeing none, I move to confirm Lily as Deputy Director of External Affairs by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Seeing no objections, and once more, if you do object, yell. Like not actually yell, but unmute yourself and say something. Because otherwise I'm going to be moving rather quickly because we do have a lot to do tonight. So congratulations, Lily. Seeing no objections, you are now the Deputy Director of External Affairs. We will now move into the confirmation of the External Affairs State Affairs Advocacy Coordinator. Noah, feel free to make your nomination for this position.
State affairs. Where do I start? Everybody who is a veteran to USG is probably rolling their eyes. Like, of course, Noah is super excited about state affairs stuff. I've got an awesome nominee. His name is Mitchell. He is in this call and he's been very active in this chat tonight. Mitchell is not only he's not only a leader on the ground, but this dude gets it. I mean, Mitchell is a guy who gets things done. And I know that I'm going to be able to count on him, especially as we're partnering to make our state affairs presence so much bigger this year. And I cannot wait to see how our committee is going to benefit under his guidance, his leadership, and with his expertise. So it is my honor as well to nominate Mitchell Kvedar to the External Affairs State Affairs Advocacy Coordinator position. That's a mouthful.
Mitchell, do you accept this nomination?
Absolutely. Do
Wonderful.
I do my little speech
Feel
now?
Free to say something. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, I'm super excited about this. Most of you guys know I'm a transfer to UConn, but I've been wanting to go to UConn my entire life. I'm so excited and pumped to get to work with External Affairs and the rest of the USG. Really making some change, trying to talk to these legislators in Hartford, bring together this awesome subcommittee of people and really get inspired and get some good stuff done. I'm so excited. I know Noah's excited. Let's go. Yeah, I have a decent amount of experience mainly on environmental issues, dealing with those folks in Hartford, but I'm so excited to bring it to the college level here at UConn, help our students. And I'm just super pumped for this position. And yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity, Noah and everybody else. I'm super excited.
Are there any other points of discussion? I also love the energy. Great energy, man. I just wanted to echo what Katie was saying in the chat there. Are there any other comments or questions for the nominee? Seeing none, I move to confirm the Mitchell as the External Affairs State Affairs this is a mouthful, Noah. Advocacy Coordinator.
It is a mouthful.
Are there any objections? Seeing none, congratulations, Mitchell. Wonderful. Now we move into the confirmation of the External Affairs, Community Affairs Advocacy Coordinator. Noah, feel free to make your nomination for this position.
Luis, you nailed that one. It is my great honor to nominate Darren Mack for the External Affairs, Community Affairs Advocacy Coordinator position. Darren was right off the bat a standout. He's already done so much organizing back in his hometown of Hartford, along with getting a holiday recognized in December to commemorate and recognize the dramatic changes that have come across our country with the 13th Amendment. He is a visionary for change, and he's going to talk some sense into our Mansfield officials. And I'm confident that Darren is going to do an amazing job honing in his skills to really represent students at the grassroots level. I'm so excited for Darren to join our team. I'm so excited for our team to all come together. This is an awesome night for USG, and it is my true honor to nominate Darren to Community Affairs Advocacy Coordinator.
Darren, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Wonderful. Would you like to say anything?
Of course, of course. I'm really excited for this position. I told people once I got into the USG, I wanted to hit the ground running, and I wanted to take any sort of role I could in making this organization better, and making UConn better, and making the state of Connecticut, and by extension the nation better in whatever way I can. And so I'm really excited for this. I don't want to ramble because God knows I can ramble, but I'm really excited to bring whatever I can to the table in this position. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Are there any other points of discussion on this nominee? Seeing none, I move to confirm Darren as the External Affairs, Community Affairs Advocacy Coordinator by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Seeing no objections, congratulations, Darren.
Thank you, everybody.
And that concludes our external affairs nominations and our nominations from the president. We're now moving into nominations for new members of the Academic Affairs Committee. So the first nomination here is the confirmation of the Academic Affairs Deputy Director of Outreach. I'll yield to Katie for her nomination.
Awesome. So I nominate Dalton Howie for the Academic Affairs Deputy Director for Outreach. The reason is I have so many reasons, but my first day on my job, I was very nervous. I'm very new to USG, the newest person, arguably, in a leadership. And Dalton came to me on the first day of the job, and he was like, I have so many ideas and I want to share them with you, and this is how we're going to get them done. And it was so refreshing and reassuring to know that I had already people in my committee who were willing to step up and help me. And I have no doubt in Dalton's abilities to hear student voices. I have many plans. We are already planning a virtual event to connect students with professors in the spring. Dalton will be head on that. I believe in him and his abilities so much. I really don't know what else to say. I'm super excited to get some strong support underneath me. I can really use it, and Dalton's the guy to do that. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Katie. Dalton, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Thank you, Dalton. Would you like to say anything else before we move into open discussion?
Only that, when I came into USG all those years ago, I did so first through academic affairs. It's sort of where I made my first friends and got my first connections into USG. So I'm really looking forward to giving back to the committee that sort of gave me a home in the first place.
Thank you, Dalton. Are there any other points of discussion or questions for the nominee? Seeing none, I move to confirm Dalton as the Academic Affairs Deputy Director of Outreach. Is there any opposition to this? Seeing none, congratulations, Dalton. Thank you. Now we move into the Academic Affairs, the confirmation of the Academic Affairs Deputy Director of Policy. Katie, back to you.
Okay, so I'm also very excited for this person I am nominating. So I nominate Lakita Athena to the Academic Affairs Deputy Director position for policy. I honestly am going to be straightforward and say that when it comes to university policy, I am not the sharpest. I have never met someone who is more dedicated to researching academic policy than Lakita. Lakita is someone who, when she is dedicated to something, she sees it literally to the very end. And that is something that we have in common. I am so excited for all of the things that we are going to do. We are working on so much legislation this year for academic affairs. You will be seeing some of it next Senate. But I know that her passion for policy and her passion for making change, her connections to the University Senate, it's all going to make academic affairs so much stronger. And I couldn't think of someone more qualified, and her support has really just made academic affairs possible. So I'm excited. That's all I got to say.
Lakita, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Wonderful. Would you like to say anything?
I just want to say super excited to work with everyone, and just sort of a PSA. I know second wave of midterms are hitting, so please make sure to take care of yourselves, guys, because burning out is very real.
It's a very good point. Are there any other points of discussions or questions for this nominee? Seeing none, I move to confirm Lakita as the Student Services, no, that's the wrong one, the Academic Affairs Deputy Director of Policy. I moved one line item down, my bad. Are there, by unanimous consent, that was the end of that sentence there. Are there any, is there any opposition to that? I'm sorry, my brain's starting to get fried with the same motion over and over again. Seeing no opposition, congratulations, Lakita. We now move into the confirmation of the Student Services Deputy Director. So I'll yield to Becky to make her nomination here.
Hey everyone, happy Wednesday, hope you're well. So it's my pleasure to nominate Miss Kavya for Student Services Deputy Director. I couldn't be happier. She's dedicated to supporting our students' well-being and empowering not only our committee members' voices, but the community as a whole. I can tell she has an incredible work ethic and will do what it takes to make things happen. I'm so looking forward to seeing her grow into this role and doing an amazing job. So thank you.
Kavya, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Would you like to say anything before we move into discussion?
Yeah, I'm just so excited to work with Becky and everyone else, and just help the students grow and thrive and just succeed. And yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Are there any other points of discussion or questions for the nominee? Seeing none, I move to confirm Kavya as the Student Services Deputy Director by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? With no objections, congratulations, Kavya. You're now the Student Services Deputy Director. Wonderful. All right. We are now going to return to the confirmation of the previous week's minutes. Is there any discussion on the previous week's minutes? Seeing no discussion, I move to approve them by unanimous consent. Is there any opposition to this? Seeing no opposition, the minutes are in order. Yay. Not as exciting as anything else we've done so far, but yay. Now on to the approval of the USG Spring 2020, I can't do that anymore. I have to stop talking. Spring 2021 fee plan. I'm going to yield to Fabio to give a little bit of a presentation, and then I actually, before Fabio gives a presentation, I want to explain how this works, because I've had a brief conversation with the Chief Justice and Fabio beforehand over email about how this is going to function. So Fabio is going to make a recommendation, but at the end of the day, we are going to determine the percentage of the fee that we are going to take for it or reduce for next semester. So there is no legislation here, but once we get into it, someone will make a motion to approve a certain percentage, and Fabio will basically go over what that means during his presentation. So we don't have a set plan yet. We have a tentative plan that Fabio's proposed for us, but at the end of the day, it is up to us to choose which percentage we want to vote on. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Fabio to kind of give a little bit of a presentation here.
Thank you, Speaker Toscano. And with that, we'll get right to it. So I'm going to share my screen here. And let's see. Trying to find the full screen button. There we go. One obstacle, one hurdle. Okay, present. All right, so for those of you that were here last Senate, you will recall that I presented a draft spring fee plan, and the percentages and the net worths that were included at the end are the same plan per se that I'm going to use here tonight. But what this presentation is going to show you is updated amounts, updated projections, and an updated status is where we are. The status has changed quite a bit, and I wish that it didn't, but this is just the nature of how USG does our accounting, how quickly our staff are able to get expenses charted in our QuickBooks account. So you will see a major difference, but I will go over all of that during this presentation. Feel free to interrupt me with questions. I think it's best if we get to them at the certain slide rather than the end. So, and the last thing I want to cover is, like Speaker Toscano alluded to, I see my role here as really to give you a recommendation. You guys are the ones we're all elected, but I feel like you should be the ones to retain the power to say, this is what we're going to do on behalf of the students. So I really ask that you pay careful attention tonight to everything. This decision is a big one. It will be covered in the newspapers. Word will spread around campus. So we got to make sure we make the right decision by the students. So with that, and that's really up to you. And I'm just here to help guide and answer questions. So with that, so this is our fall 2020 student fee revenue. So what you will see is, as of October, so these numbers were updated over the weekend, and I checked today, the numbers are relatively the same. There are no big changes between this weekend and today. So as of October 24th, 2020, we have received approximately $730,000 of our student fee revenue. Now this comes in at the beginning of every month and is based on enrollment. So as Vice President Jordan covered tonight, enrollment went up from last year. Not a whole lot, but it did go up. So in theory, our student fee revenue will go up when compared to last year. So every semester on average, we receive about $850,000 in student fees, and I did round that down. But on average, that's what it is. So we can expect a little bit to go. So the student fee, thanks Mitchell, the student fee, USG did not elect to change this fall. So on campus and off campus students paid the fee in full, $45 a semester. So my understanding is, based on the number of students enrolled at the Stores campus, which did go up this semester, that's what our revenue will be based off of. You will see that the numbers I highlighted in two different colors, rounded up and rounded down, that will become clearer towards the end of the presentation. They're just used in my estimate. So yeah, so I project that, I estimate that we will receive an additional $120,000 in student fee revenue this semester. I'm rounding that down, and that will put us to about $850,000 for the semester. So as for our fiscal year 21 income so far, last Senate, it was about $440,000, I want to say. It has since gone down to roughly $285,000. So this is the income that we are currently bringing in based off of everything that has been charted into QuickBooks. Our net worth at the beginning of the fiscal year was approximately $915,000. So when you add these two together, you get a rough estimate of our current net worth, which is about $1.2 million. Again, our semesterly student fee revenue is $850,000, and you will see that all of these numbers are rounded down. I alluded to this slide before. Our net worth right now is approximately $1.2 million. This is down roughly $200,000 from the last presentation I gave. And again, this changes regularly just based off of the expenses that get charted into QuickBooks. So as an example, if on November 1st, our full-time staff charts our income for the remainder of the student fees, which I project is an extra $150,000, on November 1st, pulling that report, our net worth is going to go up $150,000. And then over the course of the month, as more expenses are charted in, that'll come down. So these amounts are kind of like, the way I equate it to is an overall average versus like an instantaneous average, like derivative versus the average. So what we're looking at right now is these instantaneous snapshots, and that's why it's a little difficult. But this 1.2 million is approximately 150% of our semesterly student fee. So Tier 2 funding coming out of QuickBooks. So what you'll see here is we have spent approximately $180,000 in Tier 2 funding this semester so far. And what this is representative of that have been fully approved. So that means that they have been voted on favorably by the funding student staff. They've received at least 2 signatures, typically me and the president. The PO has been generated and they were finally approved by the TSOS staff. So these requests are very restricted, right? There's a lot of approval that goes in before the money is moved. And on top of all of that approval, they had to have been charted into QuickBooks. And, you know, given the staffing shortages that USG faces with our full-time staff, there is usually a processing delay. I couldn't tell you what that delay is. It's hard to tell. So it is likely that we have actually spent more than 180,000 so far, but I couldn't tell you how much because it's not charted into QuickBooks yet. And again, 180,000 is rounded down. So this is going to show you, if you pull up this link, I'm not going to pull it up here because I summarized everything. This is the data pulled from UContact. So I think this is a better idea for what we're going to look at for the whole semester. I'm seeing as though 4 weeks from now puts us, I think, past Thanksgiving break or into Thanksgiving break. I don't foresee a whole lot of funding requests being submitted for post-Thanksgiving break. And we do have that 4-week deadline. So essentially what I'm saying is this semester, students have submitted for about $445,000 in Tier 2 funding. So it is likely that we fund around that amount. Now, this number includes requests that have not been reviewed. It includes requests that have been approved. It includes requests that have been returned and are pending revision. So, you know, this amount, if anything, it'll likely go down just from requests being denied, for not being compliant, so forth. I do not think this will go up, but that's what we're looking at right now is $445,000 in Tier 2 funding. This is a difference of about $275,000 from QuickBooks. So QuickBooks says we have spent $180,000. Students have requested about $445,000. So this 275 will come into play in a future slide. I think it's the next one when I do our net worth projection. And I'm actually bumping the 275 down to 230 just because I have, you know, a sense that it is likely to go down because of, and I've spoken with Aaron, our funding staff supervisor, about this. There could be duplicate requests in there, requests that won't be approved and such. So the 230 is what you'll actually see. And a different 230 number, I'm sorry they're the same, but it's a different 230 number that we need to be aware of, is this 200 of the 445, right, that students have requested. 230 of that is coaching, so requests for coaching. And why that is unique is because we switched over to an annual system this year. So if you're part of an RSO, you may know this. Funding requests for coaching cover the full year now. So we will not be getting groups requesting funds for coaching come spring. Those requests will not be submitted. Okay, they were submitted already in the fall. And what that means is that if a group plans on not having coaching at all during the fall, it was still submitted for in the fall and is therefore still accounted for in this 445, but will not be accounted in the spring. So big picture is, if things go the same that they've gone through the fall, the COVID situation, travel restrictions, everything's the same, we're not going to be looking at 445 in Tier 2 funding for the spring. We will probably be looking at $100,000 less. Okay, is that clear? Does anybody have a question on this piece? Damani, go.
That 230, is that taken from the contractual obligations line? And if so, does that include speakers as well, or is that just the coaching numbers?
That's a good question. So if you were to, let's pull it up. I think that'll answer your question. Can everybody see this thing?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so what I did here is I went and sorted through all the coaching. And where's my little, so all the coaching's in yellow, and I added it all up. Let's try it organized. So all of this is coaching, and then the sum total was about 230,000. So these are all coaching requests, not contractual services. And then you'll see down here all other requests for just fall 2020. And that's why I have this distinction here, because these requests, all this money is really for services rendered only during the fall, whereas for coaching, it's through the fall and spring. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Cool.
thank you.
Thank you, Damani, for asking. All right, so moving on. Again, why does this matter? I'm reminding you, our money are basically tax dollars. That's how the state of Connecticut views them. So an excess and a dearth of funds are legitimate problems that we have to deal with. So this is my fall 2020 rollover projection. So taking the 915, so if you'll notice, all the amounts that are added together, which are basically, you could think of positive numbers, they're all rounded down. And then everything that is, thank you, Mitchell, I appreciate that. I'm not a finance guy at all. I'm an MCB major, so do my best. So I appreciate that. So anyway, getting back to it. So the purple numbers are all rounded down. So if you think about, let's say all these numbers were actually being added, the numbers that are rounded up are negative, and the numbers that are positive are rounded down. So what that means is that our net worth projection is the lowest it could be. That's what I tried to do, is the lowest it could be. I think it's smartest to base our decision for the student fee based off of the lowest net worth, which for us means, the closest we come to having to cut expenses, okay? So of course, with all of that in mind, the 1 million is rounded down. And that's my forecast for our net worth at the end of the fall, which would be synonymous with our rollover into spring 2020. And what you will notice is that 1 million is not that far off from 915. It's less than 10% off from it's roughly 10% off compared to our rollover from last year. Okay. And for my purposes, that isn't a huge difference. So my recommendation, again, as someone that's presenting this information to you and trying to guide all of you with all of this information, is that since this 1 million mark, our net worth happens to fall kind of right smack in the middle, which was not what I was expecting or hoping for when I put together this little chart here. I think it's wisest to not reduce the student fee. And the reason I say that is because when looking at the grand scheme of things and considering what the students may think, what's best by the students, right? I shouldn't say what they think, the best decision by the students. I think the worst outcome is having to cut services. So having to cut tier 2 funding, having to cut our giveaways, having to cut our subcommittee budgets, even having to cut, employment, the employment allocation, having to cut positions, right? I think all of those things are the worst things that we could do by the students. So if we reduce the fee and happen to run, too far into our rollover, we probably won't feel it next spring, this coming spring, right? And I certainly wouldn't be here to have to sort through it. But the differences would be felt next fall. And next fall, I'm hoping things are better. I'm hoping tier 2 funding is closer to normal. I'm hoping groups are traveling again. That would be an awful semester when things are resuming back to normal to have to cut expenses. If you wanted to do a cut, looking at everything from a linear perspective, you'd really fall at a 12.5% reduction. So feel free to consider that as well, even though the amount isn't here. Feel free to consider a 12.5% reduction or a 10% reduction, something closer to what our net worth is. Let's see. But yeah, so that is why here I'm recommending 0%. Oh, and the other thing is students, right? I feel like students would be most affected by having expenses cut. I don't think there's going to be a major pushback if we don't cut the student fee. And I think there would be major pushback if we cut the student fee and had to cut services. So that's the big picture perspective that I'm trying to pass on to you all. And you'll see in the next line, I got into this already. I'm trying to play it safe. That's my perspective here, and that's where my recommendation comes from. Play it safe. And the big point that I want to highlight is maintaining a large fund balance, as a $1 million is. It's a very large fund balance. That is harmful when it is not used to benefit students. But when you think about the cut that we were previously considering, like 25% of our budget, of our student fee, that comes out to that will be a roughly $200,000 decrease for the semester, next semester. When you think about it, when we're considering expenses like Talkspace, which an aside here, but definitely come to the demo on Sunday about Talkspace. It's a major, major expense that has the potential to eclipse, close to $250,000 as an annual expense. So just to put in perspective, cutting our student fee $200,000, then we want to, possibly spend $250,000 on Talkspace. These are the types of decisions that will have to be made post-cut, right? So that is why I say, what I would like to avoid is cutting services. So again, maintaining a large fund balance is not in and of itself harmful. It's harmful when we are not using our money to benefit the students. So last slide, questions for you. Given our current operating budget, is it harmful, and this is my question to you, to have a rollover of $1 million into the spring? And now I'm talking about the budget we passed last Senate with all the different expenses, Talkspace, we had Cultural Appreciation Series, the Justice Now initiative, all very, very expensive initiatives that I think should be completed. But with that operating budget in mind, is this $1 million rollover, potentially $1 million rollover, harmful? And would reducing our student fee, whatever amount you may decide, help us avoid or reduce that harm? So that's it for my spiel. I see there's a couple of questions. I'm going to try and find the hands.
I can do it for you, Fabio. So we'll go to Ben Keelty first.
I saw he wrote something, so yeah, please.
It was actually Ben Gladstone who wrote something.
Okay.
But I don't have a question for you. I have my own answer to this question and the discussion.
We'll move on to that afterwards. We'll move into questions for Fabio first, and then opinions second. So do we have questions for Fabio? Please only keep your hand raised for questions for Fabio. So Ben Gladstone.
Yeah. Is there a goal of it? Will it be relevant if we cut the student fee 7%? Because a lot of people during this COVID, it's harder for them to work and be able to afford the student fee, so we should cut it some. So what would happen if we cut it by 7%?
So a 7% reduction would be what, roughly less than $4.50. So let's just say $3.50 out of 45.
$3.15 out of 45.
Thank you. So let's see, 315 times roughly 18,000 students. Now it would be a reduction of about $56,000 for the semester. So, again, like the QuickBooks could change. Like we could, take in this income, and my estimate could be off. I'm forecasting another 120,000. We could take in an income of 200,000. If that's the number I thought we would take in, I would have presented that. So I don't foresee that happening. But, part of this is it's hard to make this projection given the way that our accounting processes are designed. So, I don't think a reduction of 56,000, let's say 60, I don't think that would be harmful. I'm more concerned with, the 200,000, like the 25% reduction. I don't know what that would mean long term.
I think we should do like a small reduction just to show that we understand that it's harder for people to pay these fees given the current situation.
And that's an important point, and that's why, I come here tonight to you all so that you all can consider like all of those factors for the best interest of the students. Part of my job is to make sure our organization is financially healthy, and that's, unique to my position, I guess. So thank you for that question.
We'll move to Sam Zellen.
So I know last time we talked about how your final goal is kind of to get us down to around 600,000, you said?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I understand, but I just wanted clarification. So 100 million, or not 100 million, sorry, 1 million being at that right now. So you're saying basically it's a safer idea to, with all the volatility of what's happening now and putting in cost base and all this kind of stuff, it's better to stay at that 1 million now and then like start chipping away at it once we're back to normal?
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to move us away from questions into discussion. If you have a question for Fabio, we can return to that. But generally, I'm going to open up the floor for points of discussion at this point. So please raise your hand in the system if you have a point of discussion. I'm going to try to choose people who have not yet expressed an opinion. So we're going to go through this. Everyone's going to be able to speak once, and then we can go back through again if we need to. I hope this doesn't take too long, but it is something important that we do have to dedicate our time to, so we're going to take as much time as it needs. So we'll start with Brandon, or Braden. I'm sorry.
No, it's Braden. That's good. You're okay. I guess my thought is just, it seems like reducing it by 25% would be too much, and I feel like reducing it by anything less than that is kind of pointless because we're talking about such small amount. Like you said, 7%, which was like, what'd you say, $3.50, something like that?
15 cents, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think people are really going to care if they're paying $42 instead of $45. So I guess what I'm just saying is keep it where it is.
Okay, thank you for your comment. We'll move to Ben Keelty.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to agree with that point of view. Personally, I think that, saying we understand that you're having trouble paying, so we're going to reduce our fee by $5 for you. Like $5 is not a meaningful amount when you're talking about a multi-$1,000 bill for college. And so for that reason, I agree that, a 10% or a 15% reduction in student fee, in our student fee, our $45 fee, I don't think is a meaningful amount. I also definitely think it's plausible that towards the second half of the spring semester, we could see things starting to open up, seeing the public health picture change drastically. And I think if that happens, we're going to see a lot of student fees applying for funding, trying basically to make up for a lost year. And in that case, I definitely want to make sure that we have enough money in the bank to do that. In addition, I know Ethan Wursler is doing fantastic work with Husky Market. We could look at, with the extra money that we have, we could look at expanding that in the spring and helping more people. I think that having this money can be a tool for us to use this money well, and I think that we will have opportunities to do so. That said, if we're I don't like the idea of us keeping $1 million, but I would very much prefer to collect our full student fee, and then if we take too much, reduce it for fall 21, reduce it by 25 or 50%. We can talk about that in February and March. So that's my opinion on that.
So to kind of clarify, USG doesn't annually go and be like, how much should our fee be? This is a very unique thing to COVID-19. It's something that we were asked to do over the summer, and it's something that we were asked to do now because of the situation. But if it were to de-escalate, which is a big if, I will admit, it's unlikely that we will be voting on a fee reduction for next fall. So I just kind of want to make that clarifying point off of that. If COVID is still a reality of our lives, it will definitely be on the table, to my understanding. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Fabio or Damani or anyone who may know a little bit more than I do about this. But I'm pretty sure that we will not be reconsidering this in the fall unless COVID is still in the spring, unless COVID is going to be a very real threat in the next fall.
Can I comment on that quickly?
Go for it.
So if Chris was here, that would be great. But I'm actually under the impression that we retain the power if we wish at any time. If that was the decision we made was to reduce our fee, that we could do that. I had asked, from the perspective of what could we do for the spring, like a month ago, let's say, when we weren't given the opportunity yet. And that was the answer that I got. Like, if that's the way you want to go, and not all the other tier 3s do it, but you want to, you can. That's my understanding. So just wanted to clarify.
Fair enough. I was wrong. Sometimes I'm wrong. We'll move on to Sam Zellen.
Oh, that's a residual hand. Sorry, I'll lower it.
Okay, wonderful. I currently don't see any more speakers. Oh wait, Ben Gladstone.
Is it possible to give a prorated refund to the class of 2020 for lack of on-campus time at the end of the spring semester?
I'll let Fabio answer that.
Ben, I think what you are, correct me if I'm wrong, getting at is just like trying to prorate a refund because of the lack of activities that USG funded.
Yeah.
And this is for the class of 2020, so the graduated class, the recently graduated class.
Yeah.
I don't think the bursar would enable us to do that. So that's one piece. And I also wouldn't be in favor of doing that because we did, make very swift decisions, especially with funding, with allowing virtual events and other things to proceed, which normally we don't fund. So we did try to offer other opportunities last spring for tier 2 groups to, host events. And
all stuff was cheaper, so there still is a difference in money.
I think it would be more question for the bursar to see if they would allow refunds from us.
Okay. That I'm gonna take that as the end of that line of questioning. Sarah Hill.
Okay, so maybe I guess unpopular opinion, but I'm just gonna put it out there. I think the way that I've been thinking about this, I would support like a 10% reduction in fee because I know to us it does seem like a very small amount individually, but when you're really tight for money, you're thinking about if you can even afford to go to college for the next semester, and we just saw the whole thing about the Connecticut commitment not being a thing right now, I think if we stay on this line of, oh, we're not going to make a huge difference in an individual's life, I think that's a dangerous line of thinking because we each come from our individual perspectives of privilege, and we may not always be aware of that. So I just want to put that perspective out there.
Thank you for your comments, Sarah. It's a good perspective to have. Mitchell.
Sorry about that. There we go. So kind of going off what Sarah said, I was going to ask again. I guess Fabio, what was the 12.5% again? What was the idea, the financial idea behind that again? And I guess that's mainly my point.
So that was just looking at the, let's see here. Looking at like, is this to were a linear scale here, like 178, this were a linear scale. Our 1 million net worth is halfway between 0% and 25%, the reductions that we discussed last Senate. So that's where the 12.5% comes from, is the fact that our net worth is actually 1 million. That's what I was talking about.
We'll go to Lakita next.
Hey, so I'm personally for a 0% reduction just because while I do agree that these are kind of troubling times and sometimes every penny counts in terms of savings for students, I think it was $4.5 doesn't make as big of a difference as some of the costs that we have to pay as UConn students. And we fund programs like Husky Market through USG, so I wouldn't want to see any of those programs get cut because of reduced funding that we get. In addition, I do want to say, like, as senators, if we do want to advocate for reduced fees, I would say one of the things that we might want to reach out to admin about is infrastructure fees, because currently there are a lot of students that are completely virtual, don't come onto campus at all, and they're paying a $200 and I think it was like $34 infrastructure fees for this semester. Why are they doing so? And is this going to be the case next semester as well?
Thank you, Lakita. Irene?
Yeah, so I'm going to want to echo those sentiments. I definitely think that
we do have to acknowledge that we're coming from different perspectives in terms of how much $5 or $4 means to us. But ultimately, we have to recognize that some students can afford to give more than $5. And so ultimately, we just want to be providing a product that's worth more to the individual students that need it than those $5 that we could have reduced from their salary. So if we are funding Husky Market and other initiatives, and really as senators taking that initiative to maybe start new initiatives that are going to expand on that in other departments, because there are so many other areas that we can work on as well. So I agree with a lot that's been said in terms of $5 ultimately compared to the infrastructure fee that like you just talking about, compared to all of these other aspects of our fee bill, it's just hurting the student to be taking away from the one component of what they're paying for that's going back to them.
We're going to go Gilmar, then Michael.
Yeah, I just want to speak on what Katie said in the chat about how we need to ensure that we can provide our services to our students. And then if we do reduce some of our fees and then end up needing more, then there goes a lot of our fees. And then I want to reiterate what Mitch said about how if we reduce it by $5, we're going to end up with a lot more questions as to, why couldn't we reduce it some more? So I think the best course of action we should take is a 0% reduction in student fees, because as someone earlier just said, a lot more people can, some students can afford to pay a lot more than $5. And then for those who $5 might be a lot, we need to make sure that we're providing the most student services that we can.
Thank you. Before we go on to President Hernandez, I'd like to ask everyone who's raised their hands and already spoken to lower their hands. If I run out of speakers, I will ask you to raise your hand again if you would like to speak again. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you, Luis. I also do not think that a small reduction in the student fee is very beneficial to any particular individual, because our money as students has more power and has a better or bigger impact on all individuals in the aggregate. So if everybody pays the same fee, we have more funds to fund things like Husky Market that have a huge impact on people who really need those kind of resources. So I really support a zero reduction, because a zero reduction, in my view, means a zero reduction in services. And that is more impactful for people who really need it. So I hope you will take that point into consideration, and I yield back the floor. Thank you, Luis.
Anytime. Are there any other speakers at this time? Feel free to raise your hand. And Michael, if you could lower your hand, I'd appreciate that. Mitchell.
Yeah, so kind of going off of what some of what was just said, I think no matter what we end up deciding to do, we should, just because we are in the middle of a pandemic, and obviously the coronavirus is a huge deal. A lot of folks, that us as a USG, whoever PR, I forget who's in charge of that, but making sure that we release some sort of statement saying like why we didn't reduce, or maybe if we do end up reducing by $5, why we only did $5, like that we're acknowledging it's a pandemic. Yeah, $5 isn't that much, but we're trying to do something, but we're also trying to make sure that our services are staying online for those people that really need it, and et cetera, and the rest of the services that the student government is able to provide. And anticipating, hopefully, if things turn around and things happen in the spring, and like maybe some clubs can go places and do XYZ, that we want to make sure that funding is available so students on campus can have a good time, that students in the fall of hopefully what will be like my senior year and a lot of other folks like senior years and stuff, like that money is there to make sure that after this horrible pandemic, that the campus life can hopefully not be drastically hurt because we decided to reduce our fees back then. So I think no matter what we do, we should communicate, unless if perhaps we go with the 0%, unless if we get flack for it or something. But either way, I think that's just worth noting to try and explain, because I feel what everyone's saying absolutely about like, yes, $5 is $5, and to me or to somebody else it might mean a lot more or a lot less. I think we have to acknowledge that, but we also have to acknowledge what some of these other folks have been saying about hopefully what these fees are supposed to go towards, well, kind of diverting. Like I know myself as a student, like the $45 like student activities like fee that like is the USG fee and stuff like that. That's like stuff that I'm like, okay, like yeah, I'd want to pay more honestly. Like if it meant like I'm gonna have a better like campus experience or something, as opposed to like especially these students that aren't living on campus being like, why the heck am I paying a fee for buildings I'm not walking into? Like that just doesn't make sense. Like so, yeah.
Thank you, Mitchell. Before we move on, I'd like to encourage people to, instead of interacting in the chat, to interact through speaking, if possible. I don't want to have this discourse in the chat. I feel like it's a lot more difficult to control. And I'd like to remind everyone that this is a moderated environment and we are here to discuss. So let's discuss. We'll go on to Damani.
Thanks, Luis. There are two things that I want to bring up. The first is I just went to the bursar's website to take a look at what exactly the cost of attendance at UConn is. According to that website, in-state students pay roughly $31,000 a year, and out-of-state students pay roughly $54,000 a year. For me, in that context, the 10, even like our whole fee, I don't think that is what is going to make the difference between being able to afford to attend UConn and not being able to attend UConn. And I do not mean to say that there are no people for whom that is the case, because that would be an extraordinary statement that I feel is almost certainly someone will find a counterexample on that. My point is really that when we think about what then do we do with our $45, right? The part of the student experience that we control. I think we have an opportunity with our fee that doesn't really exist anywhere else, right? Think about the rec center fee, right? As Scott Jordan just broke it down. Half of that goes to pay the debt on the rec center. Half of that goes to operations, which really means half of your rec center fee is not something that's going to directly benefit you. If you think about it, that's also why off-campus students are paying $125 as opposed to the full rec center fee, because they're still servicing the debt on the rec center, whereas those who are on campus are also paying the maintenance part of that fee, right? I think what we have to make sure we do is that we use our fees to turn around and benefit the students who need it. I don't think that there's another, aside from perhaps the education that we're getting, I don't think that there is another more venue of returning value to the students than the way we do it here, right? We write over $1 million directly back into the tier 2 experience, which I think has to be one of the most impactful things that happens on this campus, right? For the 4 years that you're here, the clubs that you're a part of, I think are probably going to have a possibly only second to the actual education that you're paying for, are probably going to be, the most impactful part of your experience here. And I think that if we were to put ourselves in a position where we had to cut, where we had to lay people off, then those people would not, be able to perform that advocacy that's supporting the students on the policy side. If we had to shift where the cap for tier 2 funding was, so that no one can get more than, right now, all student groups have access to 20,000. If we were to reduce that to some number less than that, I think we would be doing them a disservice, especially if the reason why we have to do that is because we set ourselves up to do, to be in a position where we had to cut. I think if we find ourselves in the spring with a large balance, more like the one that we were expecting to see now, then I think that what we should do is not look back and think that we made the wrong decision here, but look as to how we can use that excess to directly benefit our constituents again, right? What can we do? Maybe that ends up being doubling the number of finals care packages. Maybe that is we double the location of or availability of hand sanitizer on campus. Maybe it's adding a few extra blue lights, right? I feel like Husky Market's been beat to death here, but maybe there's an extra 100,000 that go in that direction, right? I think that if we find ourselves with more money later, then what that I think this also goes back to what Fabio said before. That's an opportunity for us to look at how do we serve the students that paid this fee. So bottom line is here, I'm advocating against a reduction of any kind.
Thank you, Damani. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to take Ethan and Ben as our final two speakers. After they are done, I'm going to motion that we go forward with Fabio's recommendation. We will then have a vote on that motion, and this business will be concluded. So the final two speakers will go Ben and then Ethan. So Ben, feel free to go.
I have a responsibility to my constituents. As the undergraduate student senate, my duty is to make sure that every undergraduate can afford to go to college. And if even one undergraduate loses the money to go to college because of coronavirus, then I have failed in my duties. The duty of a college is to ed. And if any of my constituents lose that right because of money that pays for a service that they can't use, I have failed twice in my duties. Therefore, I support a reduction in fee bill.
So just to answer Darren's question for the future, if you go next to your name, once you pull up the participant pool, you can put it down. Also, if you send me a private DM, I can add you to the list as well in the future. Thank you for your speech, Ben. On to Ethan.
Thanks, Luis. Quickly, just a very quick point. I just want to echo everything Damani said. He's right when he says that there are ways that we can spend this money. We have the best kind of problem of too much money. And I can assure you that if we were to sit down in a room for more than an hour and brainstorm ideas to actually spend this money, as opposed to just thinking about, I guess, everything else we do think about, then I think we'll be very productive. I also wanted to, I do see some folks mentioning stuff about Husky Market. I wanted to clear some stuff up. Every single undergraduate student that attended this university who applied for Husky Market will receive that funding, will receive that $300 gift card, or up to $300 worth of gift cards. So I just wanted to say it is not an exclusive thing. We had the funding to accommodate everybody, which is awesome. And that's because of fiscal responsibility on behalf of previous years. So I'd never want to, if we are truly trying to make this as accessible as possible to everybody, then if we have the financial resources in order to do that, then we'll be in a good position to be able to do that. Okay. Yep. I think that's all I have to say. I guess I'm looking forward to a vote, and I also am very much looking forward to hopefully one day us sitting down for an hour and actually brainstorming some cool ideas, considering that there are many ideas. For example, just off the top of my head, USG should be paying obviously for textbooks for low financially aid, or we should do what the government does, which is basically put up $100,000 as an interest-free loan for any graduate student who wants it. And we could do the same thing for undergraduate students. If your car breaks down and you need money to able to fix your car to get to school every day, then USG can help with that service, right? And provide an interest-free loan by the time you graduate, which you have to pay back, right? So stuff like that doesn't even cost us money, but just a service to students is something that I think we should be exploring. That's all I have to say. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Ethan. I'm not going to try to do this by unanimous consent because I respect the ability of people to choose a different plan should they want to. So I need Fabio to unshare his screen, I think, in order to properly do a poll, and then we will do a vote on this. So Fabio, if you could unshare, that would be wonderful. Thank you. It's still not working. That's not what we like to see. Damani, I need technical support. I'm sorry to say. The poll menu is up there, but I can't click any of the buttons. It disappeared. What happened? Oh no.
Can you click the buttons now?
Let me find out.
Sometimes it behaves strangely when someone else is the presenter.
I think that's probably what happened. So let me try to pull it up again. Sorry for the delay, folks. Okay, it looks like it's let me do it now. Spring 2021 fee plan. For against. So just to be clear, we are voting on the 0% plan. That is what we are doing here. 0%. I'm putting it in the title to make it clear. This is the 0% plan. If you are for it, click A. If you are against it, click B. Only senators vote, please. Only if you are a sitting senator, vote. Otherwise, I have to count the votes, and that's less fun. So here we go. I'm opening the poll now. It'll be open for 3 minutes. And if you vote and then you have time left over, go ahead and read the next piece of legislation we have. So that way we can get a head start on that discussion. You know, I actually see no reason why we can't move into the next line item while we wait here. If anyone is opposed to that, let me know. But I think that we are good to start introducing. You have 5 minutes to fill out this thing, and I'll give an update midway through the next discussion. I'm going to try this out. This is a new thing I've thought of. It's a very virtual type of thing. So we're going to try this out. If it doesn't work out, we'll never do it again. But here, we're trying this time since we're voting. So we'll know the answer in 3 minutes and 50 seconds. I'm going to start presenting my screen. Let's see. Share screen. Wonderful. There we go. I have that up now. So now we're through the voting items up to the approval of the minutes, and we'll have the response there within 3 minutes. We now move on to the Mental Care Act legislation, and I hope she's still here. I would like to hand it over to Brittany to propose this, because I know this has been in the works for a long time, and she's put a lot of effort into it. And I apologize that it's gone so late here. But I do hope that you get to present this to the full amount.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still here. So I guess context to this proposal, I wrote this back, I think, in December. It was just basically one night I just decided to write this, and it was kind of, from my point of view, at the time I was a regional campus student, so I was also talking about the inadequate services that we had at UConn Hartford specifically, and then how at the time that there was usually one person at regionals for mental health, but that person decided to leave UConn for another job, so we didn't have anyone for like the longest time. But then I started talking to some of my other friends at stores, and they were complaining about similar issues, not within regards to like not having anyone, more of just inadequate services. And with the unfortunate passing of the 2 students who died earlier this year, that kind of motivated me more to write this, given that this is obviously an issue. So just a brief context on that. In this proposal, I address an idea for an academic reform, kind of like showing the relation between mental health and academics, as well as I propose the defunding of the police and allocating those funds to services such as CMHS and I also believe I talk about inclusive mental health. So not just services and funding, but also how can we make this a very diverse and inclusive place with multilingual speakers, etc. And yeah, there's a lot to it, I guess, in retrospect, but I think overall it's just a holistic approach to how we can make the university provide more adequate mental health services.
All right. Thank you, Brittany, for going over what we have here. Just kind of to give a little bit more context, this isn't going to be a normal piece of legislation that we have here. This is something that Brittany worked on, and it's not within our legislative structure. And what we're going to do is, if we approve it, we're going to sign on to it at the bottom, and we're going to forward it along to Time Cut through Michael and myself. So that is what functionally will happen if we vote yes on this. We didn't change it into our formatting because, oh, sorry, I have 9 o'clock alarm. We didn't change it into our formatting because we felt like it's better in this form, the way it is. So we're just going to go through and vote on it like this. Is there any discussion on this piece of legislation? I actually, before we go into discussion, thank you for presenting, Brittany. I'm going to return to the previous thing. In a vote of 19-1, to however many other senators we have in abstentions, the fee plan passed. So we will not be reducing our fee bill for next semester. Sorry to say. Yes. So now that that is out of the way, are there any points of discussion on the Mental Health Act or the Mental Care Act? That's what it was, the Mental Care Act. Chris.
Hi. So I just had a concern with Section 2, letter L, which is the defunding police part. So I'm just not entirely sure why the defunding police is in the bill, and I'm also not entirely convinced that defunding the police will enhance the mental health and wellness of the students on campus, which is the stated purpose of this bill. And I also think that many of the issues with defunding, or many of the issues which have their merits with the police department, can be addressed in other ways and doesn't have to be necessarily tied to this mental health bill. So that's basically my main concern with it.
I guess thank you for sharing. I guess my response to that is I personally feel that the police has around an estimated $18 million budget. I don't think, for my personal my personal opinion is that I don't think that that is an appropriate amount for them to have. So what I'm saying is that being a former regional campus student, apologies for any noise in the background, I'm sorry, but being a former regional campus student and not having the funds for adequate mental health services or staff, and other things like that, I think that allocating money to such areas like CMHS wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. That's not to say that the police wouldn't no longer be on campus or that they would have a short equipment on a lot of things. It would be a small allocation. But I understand your concerns and thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Brittany. I saw someone else's hand raised, but I don't see it anymore. Ben Kilty.
I have, I guess, a follow-up question to this, which is, defund the police is a very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not always a well-defined goal. So, in terms of like how much and from where are we taking that money in the police budget? And so could you talk a little bit more about that and what that looks like in your ideal implementation of this?
Absolutely. So this is something that I wanted to talk more with President Thomas Cassaleas. Also, I'm on the president's task force and for mental health and wellness. So I wanted to talk more to them about what this would necessarily look like. So the numbers and logistics haven't been set up, but I just wanted to propose the idea that if we defund the police, not necessarily saying that it would be like a 90% defund or like a 70%, like it wouldn't be anything drastic like that whatsoever. But if we defund the police by a little bit, my goal was to allocate those funds, and I wanted to figure out the logistics with President Tom and the rest of the task force, and anyone else who would be in part of this implementation of this plan. So my goal, I think, my definition of defunding the police, what I mean by this is just taking that small amount of money, whatever percentage that is, and it would definitely be less than 50%. It would probably be like a very small amount that we would be able to defund, and allocating that to such services. It wouldn't be anything drastic to change the police force. It wouldn't take away from anything from the university. I'm not sure if that completely answers your question.
Thank you both. Ben, you look like you have a follow-up.
I think that's it's not a question, it's a comment. I think that's an important thing to include in the text of the bill.
Wonderful. So the speakers list here is Chris, Fabio, and then Lakita.
Hi. So is it possible to secure this funding? Because I think it's an important point that we should increase funding for mental health services on campus. But is it possible to secure funding in another way that doesn't maybe decrease the feeling of safety, the overall general welfare of students that are living on campus?
Personally, I believe that the defunding, even if the smallest amount of the police, would actually make me feel safer. But also that's my personal experience of being a Latinx queer person of color. And I know other students of color would probably feel that way as well, although I still cannot speak for everyone else. I do understand the concern, though, that defunding for the police for some people may initiate a feeling of some insecurity or unsafe feeling. I think regardless, this proposal was in suggestion to add more funds to mental health services, and if there is an alternative to extract funds from somewhere else and to invest in mental health services, then I would be more than happy to look at that as well. This was just an idea. A lot of what I proposed here is still like something that is very negotiable. Like it's more of just like whatever we need to do to expand the services and enhance the services. That's all I really want to achieve.
Thank you. Fabio?
Thank you, Speaker Toscano. First, Brittany, like really cool job on this. I know you've been working on this for probably close to a year now. So a lot of good points here. But I would just like to comment on the defund the police thing myself, because like I come from a perspective, I have witnessed an incident of police brutality. I was working as an EMT, and it's something that's stuck with me. I hate to say traumatized, but you know, I've seen it, right? So I come from that perspective of there are issues in this country, there are issues in society when it comes to police. And with that said, I am concerned that the defund the police, like literally those three words strung together, is such a partisan and politicized like verbiage right now, right? And perhaps it shouldn't be, and that's a separate debate. But in this moment, that is such a poignant statement that is it necessary to link that to all the other great things that are outlined in your proposal here? Is your proposal, like as an example, I feel like that's the one point in this proposal that like 4 different people or 3 different people have brought up. And really the proposal is about mental health and all the other great things that you're looking to accomplish. Like if this bill gets brought to the president, is the media going to rip it apart for that one point? And I just want to like throw that out there for you and everybody else to consider. Like maybe a little bit, I would encourage you, and of course for the author, you by all means do what you want. But I would encourage you to at least consider like removing that or rephrasing it, maybe pulling invest funds from anywhere, like pulling funds from anywhere to reinvest in CMHS, even citing the police department as an example. But I think that verbiage that's included is just so politicized that it almost devalues the rest of the points. And I would hate to see that. And again, I come from, I've witnessed it and I hate it. So I hate police brutality. I've witnessed it. I've seen it. It's terrible. And you don't need to see it to know that it's terrible. But, I'm not coming from the perspective of trying to protect anybody, so just throwing that out there. But yeah, anyway, overall, great job. Just wanted to express that.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I actually agree with you 100%. I think that the phrase defunding can be extremely controversial and extremely politicized, as you said. And a lot of people may understand what that means, it may not understand what that means, or just the idea of those three words together can cause a lot of controversy. But it is something that I actually want to pursue now, given the topic and seeing that the reoccurring interest of question is around the defund question. Just to cite what you said, basically like different wording of reallocation of funds to CMHS from any other service or whatever. That is something that I would most definitely change. Just because, as you said, I don't want people to say no to this completely just for that one part. Because I do think that this has a lot of benefits, and I'm all for basically however we can fund CMHS more, and especially on regional campuses. That's all that really matters to me. This was just a proposal of a way to do it, but I'm more than happy to look into other ways.
So we have quite a speakers list here. I have an instinct here. So what I want to have happen. Sorry, the formatting on this isn't going to be great because I exported it from a PDF to a Google Doc just so that if we wanted to make an amendment, we could. I see lots of speakers, and if we are going to have a discussion on the defund the police topic, I think that is a very valid discussion that this Senate could have. But I would rather it not be the focus point of this legislation. That is my personal opinion. I would rather we discuss it in a more well fleshed out piece of legislation that attacks the topic more thoroughly. No one has to do that. Don't go that way because I say so. But I would encourage speakers, if you would like to talk about the defund the police issue rather than the merits of this legislation, lower your hand for now, and we will. I recommend. I can make the amendment myself if necessary. That we make an amendment to change the language here, and then we address this next Senate. That is my proposal to you all. So, is there any senator who would like to make that motion?
I'll do it.
Who was that? I'm so sorry. I don't see everyone's face.
It's Lakita.
Okay, Lakita has made that motion. So the motion, Brittany, you can help me with the wording on this since this is your legislation. The motion, I would say, is to kind of table that, like to remove this and then bring it back in another piece of legislation next Senate.
Yeah, sure, that works. I can edit that and then change the wording to like reallocation of funds as towards services such as CMHS, like someone mentioned in the chat.
So we can. So Brittany, it's up to you which one we do. So it's up to you and Lakita. So do you want to change it to reallocation now, or do you want to remove it and work on it?
Brittany, whatever you want to do, honestly.
If we could do it now, then we can do it now. Like,
Okay.
I'm down for that.
Yeah, let's just do it now in that case.
So what's the words you want to use before we move on?
Reallocation of funds towards services such as CMHS.
I would also say add investment, reallocation and investment of funds.
Yes.
Funds into services such as CMHS.
And I don't think any examples are necessary because I don't want any examples to be politicized or take away from the overall message.
Okay, thank you. Now that we've broached this topic, and I would encourage a senator, if you have a strong feeling on the defund the police issue, to write a piece of legislation, probably bring it to student services. We'll discuss it next week. But I didn't want it to derail the whole legislation, so that's why I made this recommendation. Since we have a motion, I assume you're taking this as a friendly amendment, Brittany, which means that we don't have to vote on it.
Yes, I believe. I don't know. I'm a bit confused because. So was the point to propose this to vote on it and to pass it to what is it called, University Senate, or?
No. We would just myself and Michael would send this now, presumably with you, to Tomcat. We would say the undergraduate student government supports this here, and then you'd continue with Michael the conversation with Tomcat.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'm in favor of that.
Okay, so it's friendly. Wonderful. There's no more discussion on this. This is the way it is now. I will try to make the formatting look less gross later. Brittany, maybe if you have an original copy and you could change it to that and send it back to me, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Damani, I see, has his hand raised, so we'll go to him next.
was next actually.
Oh, Lakita, I'm sorry. I thought that it was about this. Feel free to go.
Oh no, it was not about this, but I actually had a couple of questions. So I noticed at the part about CSD, I agree that they do try to help support students that are going through mental health concerns as best as they can, but a big issue with them is that you have to go see, you know, psychologist or someone that's professionally trained in order to get diagnosed and like go through treatment plans. But the issue with a lot of students, especially BIPOC students, is that it either due to monetary reasons or the fact that they come from communities that sort of stigmatize mental health. And so either their parents are against it or they don't want to fund the use of mental health resources. That's a big concern. So there are a lot of students on campus that have mental health concerns, but they can't reach out formally and ask for help academically. Would we want to mention that in any way to address that? That's an actual concern, because I personally believe that that really is something that affects a lot of students on campus currently.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. Myself, I think that it is important to address that as a concern, and I could add that in any way, or if you have anything specific that you would suggest, I can change it, and then I could make the changes Luis had said for the original document, and then anything to add to that before it goes to Tomcat.
Okay. And then just one other question. I noticed the part where you mentioned, you know, optional fees, and I definitely love the idea. I was curious, so would that solely go towards, you know, funding of services like CMHS, or would it also go towards students that can't afford mental health, like to pay for mental health resources? And for that specifically, or how would that exactly work?
So what I was thinking in regards to that, being formerly a regional campus student, so basically, right, I wasn't able to use the resources at stores because I didn't pay the store's fees, which makes sense completely. I'm not arguing that. So where I kind of got the idea was, well, especially at regional campuses, I think it would only be fair for us to have an option whether we want to pay such fees or not, so we could utilize those services. But to your point, I'm also open to expanding it on whatever it means, but that was just my initial intention, or I guess perspective going into that section.
I was actually hoping to offer a recommendation, like, I know this might cause discussion, but I was hoping to actually make it mandatory fees towards mental health services, just because I feel like when people see optional fee for, you know, CMHS on the fee bill, people will think, oh, that's what's going towards mental health. And even university might see it, oh, we already have funds going towards mental health, and they might not take the already funding that we pay for student health and wellness and put more towards there. And you know, they might, but I feel like that's what might happen. And I feel like mental health, especially in this day and age with like national statistics showing that like at least 40% of students go through mental health related concerns, I think it's a really big topic to cover. And I think making sure that it has legitimate funding can help the program develop going forward.
I agree 100%. I guess the only issue that may occur is on a regional area is that not necessarily everyone would want to pay that fee or invest in something like that because some folks feel like they don't need it. But in my instance, in a lot of other cases, a lot of folks felt like they wish they had that option. I understand the idea of having it mandatory. I'm just not sure how a lot of people would feel about that, but I'm open to exploring the pros and cons of what that would look like.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lakita. If you want to make that motion, I would ask that you do so before we continue on in the discussion. So would you like to make that motion, Lakita, to like make that change we were discussing?
Sure.
Okay, so wait, where is it exactly so that I can get to it? You wanted to change optional to mandatory?
Yeah, I think that was sorry, give me 1 second.
Okay.
Oh, it was the proposal overview B section 1. And it had possibility. So instead of getting rid of possibility and saying offering or requiring a mandatory, or no, that's not it. Sorry. I have no idea where I saw it, to be honest. I just remember seeing it somewhere.
Okay.
It's
So
fine. I can just we can just grab it.
okay, we'll come back to it then after further discussion. So Damani, your hand is up.
Thanks, Luis. I respect the request you made a moment ago, but I'm actually going to take this back to the section we had in here about defund the police, because I feel it is within my mandate to do so. There are 2 points that I want to make. The first is that as one of our justices, Connor, pointed out in the chat, and I just sent the link, USG has already taken a stance in favor of defunding UCPD. Okay, that's not going to be something new from USG. There's no reason why that cannot be included in other legislation that we write. That's a position that we took. Frankly, it's also one I'm in favor of, right? As I remember, it passed with a overwhelming majority of support through this Senate. So is about, this is, something new. I'm not, this idea that we're not ready to take that step doesn't really hold water with me, because not only did we take that step, but we also then moved on and started working and having those discussions. I've been in meetings with both the sitting and former presidents, with Hans Reinhardt, who was at the time the police chief, talking about some of the ideas that have been raised on the Defund UCPD Instagram, as well as in the letter that was written from something like 35 to 40 student groups signed on to. So the idea that we aren't ready to start that conversation is, to me, just totally off base. The second thing here is I want to connect these 2 ideas between mental health and UCPD, because I think that there is some confusion as to why those 2 issues might be correlated with each other. And there's two things that kind of come to mind for me. The first is that there is a population on our campus, mostly students of color, who feel as though or are made uncomfortable by regularly seeing police officers, who, instead of a feeling of safety when interacting with the police, whether that be seeing a cruiser go by or spotting a undercover vehicle on the highway or whatever, those feelings are different for everyone, and particularly within students of color can bring out feelings of fear in particular, that can be extremely stressful. When looking at and I think that kind of obviously connects itself to mental health, when you have students looking around and regularly finding themselves in situations where they might be feeling fearful. Now, the second parallel is, if you take the stance that USG has taken, that the way that the UCPD is currently funded is not the right way to do it, and that the funds that are there need to be used differently or used elsewhere, which again is a position USG has already taken. If at the same time we're also calling for more funds to be allocated towards mental health resources, it makes sense that we connect the 2 financially as well. Because if we are saying that there's one department that has too much money and another department that says that we're saying does not have enough. I think, we would be fooling ourselves or blindfolding ourselves if we did not connect the dots there and say money should be taken from here and placed here. Now, I don't want to gloss over any nuance there, because I do think that there could be further discussions about how that could be done. I think that someone had alluded to percentages, or whether it's a direct this for that, or however that is being worked out, is again part of the advocacy that we were all elected and sent here to do. But I think it's important that as we're talking about things that affect mental health, right, that we shouldn't be shying away from talking about defund UCPD, both on the grounds that A, USG has already stated that we're in favor of it. It's on our Instagram. I just sent the legislation to the chat. And B, we've implicitly endorsed it again by saying that one department is underfunded and another department needs more funds. With that, I'll yield back.
May I just add something briefly, if that's
sure.
Okay. So thank you to Mani for saying that. That's extremely appreciated. I'm not gonna lie. I understand the questions with defund the police, but to Louise's point, I felt like at this point, why was that the main focus when we're talking about benefits of mental health? To me, as a queer Latinx person, that is very disrespectful. And I understand how the issue could be politicized. However, I don't think people can necessarily speak on this issue unless they were affected, or if they're a person of color, or whatever they're a part of, that it makes them so scared of the police. When you're scared of the police, it hits you different. Like, the way you think of the police when you're Black or Latinx or whatever you are, it just hits you different. And what I mean by that is, when I was a regional campus student at Hartford, and when I was threatened for being queer, and I had no one to go to but the police, and I had no mental health services, he had just laughed at my existence and my life. And he was the one guy to determine whether or not someone was to, someone was to get in trouble or not, or if I was going to be protected or school at not, and he didn't do that. And not to say that that's all of UCPD, but when you're a regional campus student and you don't have those resources, and when you're a store student and you don't have those resources, and then to confide in the police for what? Not to make a generalization, but I don't think defunding the police is necessarily a radical issue or proposal. It's literally just taking money, not even a large amount, at the smallest amount, and allocating it to something else. It's not asking for abolition. It's not asking for expansion. It's not asking for anything insane or anything that's seen as radical. I understand that for some people that may be a new proposition, but however, I also want to keep in mind that the privilege that some folks have to only focus on such an issue with ignoring everything else that comes along with this proposal. Given that, I personally stand with defunding the police. I don't see it as a political issue. However, I do see how it can be seen as a political issue. But at the end of the day, student lives shouldn't be a political matter, because my existence and everyone else's existence shouldn't be a political matter. As someone who has personally dealt with police brutality and has survived police brutality in my past, I am scared of the police. And while that's only my personal situation for my own trauma, I can only speak for so many people. And I understand that if USG had favored it in the past, I don't understand why it's necessarily an issue now and why it's distracting away from this proposal. Because to me, I just feel at the utmost disrespect. But I do understand the diverse opinions. However, I just had to state that. How I just found it wasn't appropriate to only focus on that, because at that point, it seems like the intention is to only nitpick and not view this as an overall proposal and to see the benefits of that. Thank you.
I appreciate both of those statements and would like to clarify what I did before. I wanted to bring the talk back to the issue at hand, but I'd forgotten that we had passed that legislation. I'll open the floor to motions before we move on because we have quite a few people who want to speak. And I know it's rather late into the night. I would like to give everyone the opportunity to speak if they'd like to express it, but I would like to encourage everyone as well to kind of keep in mind that we're all students here and we all have time, so we need to be civil, and we also have to understand that people are getting tired, and when people get tired, we're less focused on the issues. So be sure to be to the point, but also if your point's been brought up and been belabored, please don't continue to belabor it. I think we all understand the arguments here. I'm going to first open the floor to motions. If you have a motion, I will accept it now. Just say something if you have a motion and you are a senator. Like, unmute your mic and say so. If not, if I don't hear a motion in the next... Okay, Ben, what is your motion?
To amend the part about defund the police to say that the part of the police budget dedicated to prevention of violence shall not be affected.
That is a little bit off from where the conversation was. I'm not going to accept that motion at this time. I'm sorry to say, but I'm not going to accept that motion at this time, and we are going to continue with discussion. Sam, you are next in the discussion.
Thank you. So I think it's also just important to see, just like in kind of more defense of why I think defunding the police is totally a valid part of a mental health discussion at UConn, is we went through this a couple of months ago, where the president of the university, in response to calls for defunding the police, talked about giving more mental health training to the police officers. And if we as a body, as an undergraduate student government, are going to push for mental health to be, mental health situation being made better at this university, we have to outline what we want that improvement to be. And if we push for mental health to be improved, and then the university turns around and gives more money to the police because that's their vision for improving mental health, then A, we are 100% not representing the constituents of this university, and B, we are completely, just allowing the administration to just write their own rules as opposed to giving what we want, giving up what we want to actually be changed. So I think, changing things for what it might be political or what might be, what might go in and might be, accepted by Tomcat or the media or whoever just isn't the point here. I think we need to take a stance. And yeah.
All right, thank you. Sarah Hill wants to make a motion, so I'm going to let Sarah Hill make a motion.
Okay, cool. So based off of all of that, because I agree with it, is motion to change the point that says reallocation and investment of funds back to defund the police. But basically just back to the original point.
I second that motion. Josh Crow seconds.
I don't believe we need seconds anymore, but if we do, I appreciate it, Josh. So we're on this motion now. Everyone lower your hand and re-raise your hand if you are in favor of this, if you would like to speak on this motion. I'm going to cap the speakers list for this at 2 speakers. Darren Mack.
I'm going to keep this brief for the sake of time and, due to the fact that it is 9:33, I'm going to, keep in mind of everybody else. But, I'm not going to belabor any points that were said before. Damani made really great points, everybody else. in favor of defunding the police, but I'm not really going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the, issues that are being brought up in regards to like the politicization of it and whatnot. Yes, it's a political issue. I'm not going to disagree with you there. I'm not going to say that it isn't. I'm not going to say that, but the thing is that when it comes to these issues, we have to take a stance. We wouldn't be doing our constituents justice if we played passive politics and not wanting to take a side, not because you wanted to offend anybody or whatnot. The thing is that, these issues are correlated, as, people said before. These issues go hand in hand. Just to nitpick at one means that you really don't care about the other. And so, I really ask my fellow senators to really look at this and ask yourself, what side of history do you want to be on in this particular, issue? Yes, there are sides to this. There are really no shades of gray with this, but, when you think about it and when you look back on this particular meeting, I mean, where do you want to see yourself? I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. I'm not going to keep rambling and whatnot because, this issue is really, tough with me. But, it's a politicized issue, but what side of the fence do you want to be on? I mean, you can say that you don't want to, but I mean, think about what you're doing to the people who need these, services in regards to mental health. I mean, I think that mental health is a lot more important than having, a bunch of, police officers on campus that don't necessarily deal with violent crime as is. Most of the officers are called to, situations in which don't necessarily involve them or need them. But I'm not going to go into that. We all know that. If you don't, educate yourself. That's my piece. It's a politicized issue. Just pick the right side, essentially.
Thank you, Darren. We are going to move on to the second of two speakers for this amendment, and that is going to be Mitchell. Mitchell, are you there?
Totally my bad. So sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'm not gonna, same as Darren, I'm not gonna, I was gonna say some of the same points as him, but I'm not gonna talk about those points. My only difference, I suppose, to make it quick, was I understand, again, a lot of us probably have very different opinions coming from our own political backgrounds or whatnot on what's associated with defunding the police. But what we're talking about here, if they're not talking about abolishing the police, we're talking about reallocating some funding so it goes to mental health services, which I think is something that I personally agree with. And I guess it's just the phrase defund the police that's causing issues. But if I say we keep the phrase, or at least my opinion on this motion is we keep the phrase defund the police, include a subpoint saying it sucks that we have to include a subpoint, but if we're trying to do away with some of the political controversy, a subpoint saying reallocation of funding, not talking about doing away with police, just reallocating some of the funding. It's not, I don't think that's anything too crazy, kind of like what Darren was saying. The police have a decent amount of funds, and I think if we all agreed that mental health services are important and we could reallocate some funds, I think that works out. I suppose that's my opinion.
Luis, are you here? I don't know if everybody else.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. I had to deal with something real quick. So that is it. That's all the discussion on this motion. I'm going to move to pass this. Wait, is this motion friendly? I should have asked that earlier. We could have just done this. Brittany, is this friendly?
Yes.
Okay. So we've friendly amended it away, and now we're friendly amending it back. Wonderful. So it's back to its original form. Before I take any other motions, I see that we have 2 or 3. I'm going to let the CDO speak for one moment. Because, yes, Damani, go ahead.
Thanks, Luis. I'm hearing a lot of the debate that's going on here, and given the time and the content here, I would like to refer this to the Diversity and Outreach Commission and take it up there and have it back to Senate next week with reflections in the proposal based on some of the things that have been raised here tonight. So hopefully when we take another look at it in 2 weeks' time, any ambiguity that currently exists, with some of the questions that were asked is no longer present. So I'm calling for someone to make that motion, seeing as I cannot.
I motion. Josh Crow.
Okay, we have more than enough motions to make that a reality. I'm going to move that this happens by unanimous consent. Is there anyone opposed to referring this to the Diversity and Outreach Commission to have it returned? If you are, unmute your mic and say so right now, otherwise it's happening. Okay. With that, we have referred this to the Diversity and Outreach Commission by unanimous consent. This will be on the Senate's agenda for next week, and we will either pass or refer it again or fail it then. With that done, we are going to move on to our next piece of legislation. Not next week, the week after. Senate is every other week. Next week we have a caucus, and we will talk about that in announcements. So now that we are through the Mental Care Act, thank you all for bearing with me and each other through that. It's late, and I appreciate you all staying and contributing, because that's really the most important part of Senate, is the ability to contribute late at night to these very important conversations that need to be had. All of your voices are valued. I'm sorry I didn't get to call on all of you, but it is rather late, and I want us to be able to get to bed at a reasonable hour. So we will now move into the international student legislation. I'm going to invite the authors to present it at this time.
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Ibin, and also I'm a multicultural and diversity senator at USG. So the reason of this legislation is mainly focused on to improve more students' awareness of child mental health resources, especially virtual support for international students. And it will be present in the form of recovering the student support group for international students, and also forming a group therapy centered around those students too. And also, meanwhile, we will urge child mental health and ISSS to collaborate more and create more targeted events to address students' mental health issues and also academic difficulty they faced.
Wonderful. Thank you for presenting the legislation. Are there any points of discussion at this time? Darren, is your hand up from the previous discussion, or is it up for this?
Oh, that was the previous discussion. My apologies for that.
No worries. Are there any points of discussion at this time? Seeing none, I'm going to move to pass this by unanimous consent. All those in favor of passing this piece of legislation by unanimous consent? No, that's not the right way to do it. Are there any objections to passing it by unanimous consent? Seeing no objections, this is considered passed. Oh, Lakita, before we go, Lakita, go ahead.
When it says that shall will further conduct in one of the therefore be it resolved clauses, are we giving Shaw a suggestion to do it, or are we telling them that they will? Because I feel like that's more of a suggestion to them rather than
we have a meeting with Shaw mental health counselor, and she addressed that these programs are going to happen in the future.
Shouldn't it be a whereas clause in that case? Just because if they're already doing it, we don't need to make so that we have to do something about it. It was just a phrasing thing. I'm so sorry. You guys can keep it as it's if it's all right.
I'm going to consider that a minor adjustment that Senate leadership can make at a later date.
Okay.
Does that satisfy you, Lakita? Wonderful. We will move now. I've still seen no objections, and it's been open for objections for quite a while. So this is considered passed now. Wonderful. So that's the last item on the agenda. We are now into discussion. Are there any points of discussion? Please raise your hand if you have a point of discussion. Just to differentiate before I call on anyone who's risen their hand for discussion. Discussion is something that we will discuss. Announcements is something that you would like to say about something upcoming in the future, or just in general. So if you would like to make an announcement about an event, that's an announcement. If you'd like to have the Senate discuss something, that's a discussion. With that said, Ben Gladstone, feel free to go ahead with your point of discussion.
Yeah, I propose amending Executive Order 7. In Executive Order 7, in Article 3, Article 3A, a Chief Diversity Officer has the power to suspend any member, and I want to propose amending that so that suspension can be overturned by a 1/3 vote of the Senate.
Thank you for bringing that up, Ben. We cannot amend an executive order. I have been in talks with the president about turning that into a piece of legislation that the Senate passes. So when it comes to Senate, we can discuss that more thoroughly. I will also include you on the formative stages of drafting that legislation between myself and the president. Fabio, I see your, but I think that I addressed what you have. Did I not?
No, you did. That was good.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for proposing the amendment, Ben. I'll be sure to keep you in the loop on what happens with converting that executive order into a piece of legislation. Are there any other points of discussion? Seeing none, we will move into announcements. Are there any announcements? Fabio.
Okay, gonna try and make this quick because it's 9:45. So first, thank you for listening and paying attention during that fee plan. That was really important. I genuinely appreciate your time here tonight. Second, there's going to be a Talkspace demo this Sunday at 6 p.m. You should have all received an email from Speaker Toscano. Thank you, Braden. And Talkspace is an app that we're looking into basically purchasing access to for undergrads at UConn. The reason why we're bringing it forward to your attention is because I'm going to be transparent. Talkspace has been kind of unwilling to do a pilot program and kind of wants us to purchase it for everybody, which long story short means it's going to be $250,000. So before we do that, I'd like to be really sure that you all are in agreement. Invite your friends, make your roommates come, reach out to students that you may feel like would use this service. I'd love to hear feedback from like the students that will, really be using this and are really pushing for this. It's an app, and basically it will give you 24/7 text access to a therapist. They don't respond immediately, but it's a licensed therapist, master's level or higher, includes psychologists, and it's a text. I don't know too much about it myself. Really, Becky is the one to go to, but they're giving a demo, and they're hoping that their chief medical officer is able to attend and really explain the service. If anybody wants to see some literature, they sent me a couple research articles that I haven't read yet, but that I'm going to look at. So if anybody's interested in reading those, I can send those your way. Just send me an email. But yeah, there's going to be, Kylie's doing some stuff. Thank you. But yeah, invite your friends, invite your roommates. Really important that we get feedback on what people think of this. And third, I just want to say, we're all here on our every other Wednesday nights because we all care about one another and want to see the best for UConn students. And, we all have that same passion and ambition. So, sometimes the issues will get contentious and, I wish it wouldn't. But, we're all here from like the goodness of our hearts. And I just want us all to just remember that in the back of our minds. And us in leadership, we're all here for you. So don't ever hesitate to reach out. And that's my spiel for the night.
All right. Thank you, Fabio. I do want to just clarify before we move on to other announcements that I've not sent everyone an email about it, but I will be before Sunday. I sent an email to the people who are panelists about it, but it will be like orientation for those of you who were at orientation. So we will be sending out that email, and there will be promotional materials as Kylie indicated in the chat. Thank you, Fabio, for that. Chief Diversity Officer Douglas.
Hi. Funny that you should use that title because I'm actually going to make an announcement as the chief of staff.
My bad.
But actually, I'll have two. So starting with the chief of staff announcement first, the office renovations. If you're interested in being a part of those, please go ahead and send me an email at chiefofstaff@usg.uconn.edu. I believe Luis said something about it in his most recent email. But if I don't hear from you by Friday on that, I'm just going to assume you're not interested in it. And we'll just move forward with those who have sent me the emails because we do need to get underway with that. That's one. Two is as Chief Diversity Officer. To all of you wonderful senators, Luis has also sent you a application to be a voting member in the Diversity and Outreach Commission. So if you are interested in being part of employment decisions when those come up before the commission, you have to get that appointment from the speaker. We did refer a piece of legislation there tonight. You do not have to be a voting member to come to the meetings. If you are interested in attending the meetings at all, my listserv has like 4 people on it as of this moment. If you would like to be added to that listserv, email me at diversity@usg.uconn.edu. That email is in the report slide, and I'm about to put it in the chat.
Thank you, Monty. Are there any other announcements before we conclude Senate? I just want to take one. Thank you all for your participation. I want to announce that I really appreciate all of the participation here in Senate. I think that it's a great thing that we don't always see. Most of the time we just pass things unanimously. While it is frustrating, and while I do apologize for getting a little bit visually frustrated at times, it is important to have this discourse, and I'm glad we're here. I appreciate all of you, and I appreciate the faith you put in me last Senate, and I hope to continue to do you proud. So with that, I'm going to call Senate to a close at 9:51 p.m. Thank you all. I'll be here for another 10 minutes. If you have any questions for me, expect an email from me soon about this Talkspace stuff. Other than that, have a nice week. You know how to reach me if you need to. represent@usg.uconn.edu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luis.
Thank you, Ben.
Have a good... I'm exhausted.
Yeah, it's like that sometimes.
Yeah. Are 3-hour Senates kind of the norm?
If something controversial comes up, it can be, but not always. It's a hit or a miss. You either get 1.5-hour Senates or you get 4-hour Senates. There's not really much in between. Wonderful.
Well, I'm gonna go.
Are you sticking around for a little bit?
Yeah, I was actually going to call you, but as long as we're here.
Yes, no, I think this works. I'm trying to figure out what email to send to because I haven't done this before.
Recording.
Right. Okay.